What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you, as always, with my certified fantabulous thermonuclear AF co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes. We are here to talk about the biggest regret for every NBA team during the 2023 calendar year. Nice little New Year's themed podcast. We are doing the Western Conference on this one. I don't know which one I'm putting up first. I think West will probably go first at this point based off the order of events since we already recorded the Eastern Conference pod. So they will be split up. It's a fun exercise before we get, or maybe it's not so fun for certain fan bases. But before we get started, the usual reminders, please subscribe if you haven't already. If this is your first time checking us out, hit the subscribe button on YouTube, subscribe on Apple and Spotify. If you've done those things, word of mouth recommendations go a very long way. Share our content. Also, ratings and reviews on Spotify and Apple help us leap up those charts. And join our Discord. The link to that's in the podcast and YouTube description. A lot of great conversations happening in there all the time. You can also follow us on all our socials. They are on screen or in the YouTube and podcast descriptions as well. Grant, how the heck are you doing?
I don't know if you saw we're recording this Wednesday night, the Nets game tonight. Nick Claxton was inactive, but he was wearing a green sweater with some sunglasses, and the sweater had like spikes in the shoulders, it looked like, but like under the fabric. So
I did not see this.
So I'm doing great because I've never seen a sweater like that. And so I'm excited about it. And I was going to say, like Nick Claxton, I'm ready to make some points because his shoulders had little points on them. So here we go. We're going to make points today. Also, we're going to read some news because we forgot to do that last time. We're going to do it now.
Yeah. So let's get into some NBA news, the latest news and rumors first. Do you want to start us off?
Sure. For the Atlanta Hawks, DeAndre Hunter underwent a non-surgical procedure on Tuesday to address his right knee inflammation. He'll be reevaluated in 2 weeks. Also, according to Mark Stein, there was some chatter during the recently concluded G League showcase that indicates the Hawks are willing to move DeJounte Murray. He cannot, by the way, be moved until January 9th because of that extension he signed over the offseason. The Hunter thing's a big blow. Not great.
Yeah, that's not a great look for the Hawks, but it's probably... Is it the right decision? I guess it depends on if they're doing it just to get like recoup picks and prospects. I don't know if I love it, but if it's to sort of calibrate the roster a little bit, like to get some bigger sized wings in there. But I just don't know. This team is like so blah in the worst way. I don't know what to make of them because Murray's not on a bad deal. Mm-hmm. It's just he has not nudged them far enough. I mean, first of all, they're not better than they were last season, but he just hasn't moved the needle in the way that they were expecting him to, or this core in general.
He's simultaneously been like pretty good and actually better offensively maybe than you would have expected, but he hasn't been the defensive piece that they expect. And that was really like the whole deal of let's put this guy next to Trae Young. He can guard ones or twos or whoever Young can't. Like that. He's just, I don't know what the explanation is, but Murray has just kind of flipped as a player type. He's an offense first player now.
And the other thing is just like, is this more so a symptom of, okay, well, DeAndre Hunter and Clint Capella aren't going to have robust markets, and so we're going to move DeJounte Murray instead?
Yeah, I mean, you can only trade guys that their market's for. I don't know how much of one there is for either of those guys. That's a good point.
The Boston Celtics are reportedly interested in Kelly Olynyk, a nice little reunion with him per Mark Stein. The thing I'll say there is they can't really, unless they're going to trade Al Horford or really step ladder their way to get to Kelly Olynyk's money. He's making $12 million. That needs to be a buyout situation. And they can sign him because he's making less than this year's mid-level. So they will be able to sign him via the buyout market. I don't view this as I'm sure they're interested in him. The path to him getting there would have to get lucky because you would have to, like, why would Utah buy him out? He's someone who they might want to bring back, I would think, if they're not going to trade him. And then two, what if someone else wants him and can promise him a more prominent role?
Yeah, and like I like Kelly Olynyk. I think he's definitely the center that several teams should be targeting. I don't know about the Celtics though. It feels like their third big ought to be kind of like what Keita has been for them in like a tiny role, just like a big bruiser. Olynyk's not really that. He kind of does a lot of the Horford type stuff, I guess. So I would prefer like a change of pace as another option. It's like a big banger.
Gives you some rim pressure. Yeah. Rather than a big who stretches the floor so that you can optimize what little rim pressure you get from the perimeter players.
Right. You've got that covered already if you're Boston. The Brooklyn Nets, Jacques Vaughn said Lonnie Walker IV is going to be out through at least this Friday with a hamstring issue and an illness. He has not played since November 30th. You would think you would have thought this last year, but Lonnie Walker has played well enough this year that he should not be signing another minimum deal. 14.6 points per game this year, making 46% of his threes. Like really quietly awesome year for him. I would have assumed he was going to get a bigger deal after playing well for the Lakers, but here we are.
Who's more likely to get a minimum contract or sign a minimum contract, him or Kelly Oubre Jr. next season?
I mean, neither of them should be on.
I'm saying you have to pick one though.
I'm gonna pick Walker just because Oubre's got the wing size that might. I mean, yeah. But again, if either of them signs for a minimum, somebody got a bargain, I would say.
For Charlotte, Brandon Miller left their loss on Denver this past Saturday with a right ankle sprain. He missed Tuesday's game against the Clippers and is listed as day-to-day. He could return on Thursday against the Lakers. There's just that language just proves that the Western Conference podcast is going up first, Grant. There you go.
that settled it. Nothing to add there. The Chicago Bulls, Zach LaVine has resumed on-court work, or as of Wednesday when we're recording this. The Bulls don't have a firm timetable for his return from that right foot injury, according to the Chicago Tribune. He has not played since November 28th, and the Bulls are 9-4 without him. Woj reiterated the market. This is my favorite thing because what was I forget what the adjective was before. There is no market. It's non-existent. I forget what it was. Now Woj says the market for LaVine is quote barren as he recovers from a right foot injury. We need to. I mean, we got to come up with some more. It is the market is a desolate hellscape where nothing lives. You survive only using your wits and grit. Nikola Vucevic is also going to miss the next 7 to 10 days with a groin strain. That is per The Athletic.
Can we stop with the breaking news updates just on the
breaking news? Nothing's happening.
Can you just FYI us when there is a market that's not an infernic abyss for Zach LaVine at this point? Yeah. Which, by the way, I'm just curious as to what he'll actually get traded for, though, with all this reporting. Like, it could be a leverage play from Zach LaVine's people to try and just lower his value and get other teams interested. It's definitely not benefiting the Bulls by saying there's not a market for him unless they're looking for cover as to why they haven't moved him. I don't think anyone would expect them to move him while he's injured. I'm very curious as to, I think you and I, when we said, would he get 2.5, the equivalent of first round picks and prospects, we both hit the over. Would you still say that? Or I
don't think so. I forgot we had that conversation. You'll never believe it. But I was thinking like 1.5. Is it going to be over under 1.5 now? So it suggests I'm under the 2.5. That's
I'll take the over on that. But our initial one, I don't know if I would still stick with the over.
Well, and is it going to be dead salary or is there going to be a real player or two in there?
Are they attaching picks to LaVine to try and up the ante for this season?
I mean, we'll see.
You're about to say golly again.
I was going to say gosh, and then I was going to say golly, and I kind of stopped in the middle. Let's see. No caps. Yeah. So you got the Mavericks next.
Yeah. So Kyrie Irving, who has not played since December 8th with a bruised right heel, has ramped up his on-court work, according to Jason Kidd. There's still no concrete timetable for his return, which is apparently fine because Luka's just detonating all over the place. Grant Williams was moved to the bench on Christmas and is expected to remain out of the starting five for the foreseeable future. Tim Hardaway Jr. is starting at the moment, but Kidd did say he plans to roll out Luka, Kyrie, Exum, Derek Jones Jr., and Lively once Irving returns from injury. That's noteworthy, and I don't want to spoil part of this podcast because it does involve Grant Williams for the Magic, but that's just something to, like, you didn't give up a 2030 pick swap for Grant Williams to not start him.
Yeah,
that's where I'll leave it.
Don't you think ultimately in the playoffs, for example, like Grant Williams is going to matter more than Tim Hardaway Jr.? He just has to, just for the matchups you're going to need him to handle and that kind of thing.
Does he matter more than Exum and or Derek Jones Jr.?
I mean, well, I don't know. It kind of depends who they play.
If you're going to need a problem
to play, I guess that's not great. Although, I mean, both those guys have been awesome finds. I mean, Exum is really the find. Jones Jr. he's just playing better than he has.
Yeah, the offense is pulled back for him, but for sure.
Yeah. Denver, Aaron Gordon, this is a wild story, required 21 stitches to lacerations on his face and right hand, his shooting hand, after suffering a dog bite on Christmas. He's out indefinitely. I think he was listed, the reports I saw, in good condition. It's not expected to be like some crazy long absence, but that's not a, I don't know if that's a new one in the injury book, but that's a rare one for sure. I just
want to know whose dog was it? What was the circumstances?
Right. Yeah. Real scary though. I mean, like, that's 21 stitches is no joke.
No.
Hope he gets back soon. That's a wild one.
That's a big absence. I mean, the Nuggets are still just Jokic is the only player they can't afford to lose, but their life on defense gets a lot harder without Aaron Gordon in the fold.
What do you think? More Peyton Watson, maybe more small ball with Brown playing. Like, what's the more MPJ at the 4? I don't know what that's going to change really lineup
I think
wise.
Peyton Watson is the guy who will benefit most, and I think Brown and Watson will soak up a majority of the minutes. It's just where like maybe you just see more Strother get a chance, or do they have to like break the Zeke Naji in case of emergency glass?
Zeke Naji's about to start happening. It's gonna be. What if it does? That's what we need the Woj update. Zeke Naji is happening.
On the Pistons, they set the NBA record for consecutive losses with 27 on Tuesday night against the Nets. Congratulations to them.
Hadn't heard about that for weeks on end.
On Run It Back, Shams Charania has said that the Pistons are targeting a 4-man via trade. This is kind of recycled news, but he adds names that he's monitoring, or that the Pistons are monitoring, are Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, Tobias Harris, and Miles Bridges. I just
explain this.
Pascal Siakam's purpose on this team? That is just like, what are we doing here? And then, go ahead.
No, I was just going to express incredulity using different words. Probably, I don't understand and literally any of these guys. I mean, I guess you'd say, well, they're going to max out OG when in free agency. I get it, but like
something to note is just like, what's the point of trading for Miles Bridges because his bird rights won't transfer, and so you're going to have to, unless you think he just doesn't cost anything to retain. You're just going to go after him in free agency anyway. And then what does that say about the organization that they're comfortable bringing in Miles Bridges would be another thing to note. Anunoby, I think, makes a lot of sense. But again, why are you giving up assets for a soon-to-be free agent who, if I'm Anunoby, even if offers are a little bit less, as long as they're comparable, I'm not staying in Detroit. I don't want to be a part of this.
No. Right. Yeah. Well, like if a team loses 27 games in a row, the playoffs are like 3 years away. Like, I don't know. I don't know. Check the stats, I guess. The sample's really small because nobody's lost that many games. But like, if you sign with Detroit as a free agent this summer, you're basically
the pitches were 2 years away from being 1 year away.
You're saying like, I will not play a postseason game until 2026 at the earliest. Like, that's just there's no way the turnarounds just don't happen like that. All right. I've got the Warriors next, based on the latest timetable for Draymond Green's work on himself program, which I love how you're framing that. He could return to the Warriors by the end of the week. What incredible work he will have done on himself by then. He'll just be a changed man, right?
Such a bullshit spin by the league. I'm not even blaming Draymond Green for this, who accepted it. This is just such BS spin. I did want to ask you, it's not in here, what did you make of Steve Kerr's, do we call it a rant? Or like, I don't know, the diatribe on legislating defense out of the game? Can I give you my initial thoughts?
Please.
One, I don't think he wasn't singling out Jokic in particular, just because Jokic is not the free throw merchant that a lot of these other guys are. And two, or I have 3 points. Two, I don't think he's wrong, but three, it's just very rich for someone to talk about legislating defense out of the equation when they coach Steph Curry, who has these very unnatural leg kicks.
Well, that and like although the Warriors would say Steph Curry is the victim of assault like every time he's running around off the ball and it's never called. But like the fact that defensive players sort of can't touch offensive players has been more helpful than not to both Steph and Klay over the last decade. Like, I think them running around off the ball, like being free to move, has been a huge factor in the Warriors' success.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, like, and also my first thought is just like anytime a coach complains about officiating, or almost literally anybody, I just tune it out. I just like, I don't care. This isn't.
I actually, Light Years had talked about this. I liked it because he was basically shitting on Adam Silver rather than the referees, who he said, I think, did a fantastic job. So I appreciated the substance of this one more than most others, but it's just like, it wasn't a shot at Jokic in particular. It was more just like him firing at will.
Draymond back by the end of the week, huh? That's what
Maybe.
we're doing.
We're not sure yet, but we're on to the Houston Rockets, Grant.
Good.
Dylan Brooks left Houston's Tuesday night loss to the Pacers with an oblique injury. Those are fickle. And to that end, head coach Ime Udoka says there is no timetable for his return, which is, I mean, that's a big deal. Houston is second in points allowed per possession as we record this. That's wild.
More Tari Eason is what I'm hearing right there. For the LA Clippers, Kawhi Leonard has missed the Clippers' past 3 games with a left hip injury. This would not have been news last year, but he was an Iron Man up until this season, incredibly. Ty Lue on Kawhi's status moving forward. Quote, he's still day-to-day. He's progressing. He's feeling better, just not ready yet. Let's hope that this is not like the tipping point of the season where Kawhi goes back to the sporadic availability thing, and we look back at the first 25 games as like, hey, remember when Kawhi was healthy, how great he looked towards the end of that?
Don't even put that into the ether, please.
It's already there. I'm just pointing it out.
The Lakers, Gabe Vincent underwent arthroscopic surgery on his left knee and will miss 6 to 8 weeks. He has appeared in just 5 games this season. The surgery comes after he made his initial return, only played a game, and then all of a sudden there was knee soreness immediately. So that's pretty ominous. And then both LeBron James, left knee, and Anthony Davis, left ankle sprain, remain questionable on the Lakers' injury report. They're both clearly playing through something, but it's always a little jarring, the fact that they're just listed perpetually on the Lakers' day-to-day injury report.
Yeah. The Vincent injury, I mean, it was kind of trending this way, it felt like, because he just couldn't get it right.
It's a big deal because when you look at the roster and how they feel about D'Angelo Russell right now, like Pete Gabe Vincent is someone who maybe closes for the Lakers.
I mean, that had to have been at least a consideration when they signed him. It was just like, okay, this guy is the two-way guard that we can put on the floor, and it's not a, well, Russell kills us defensively, and it's not a Vanderbilt kills us offensively. You could just put Vincent out there, and you're going to be okay. He's a real playoff player.
I wonder if it makes it more or less likely he gets traded now as sort of salary filler as part of a, we've always looked at it as it'll be D'Lo and Rui Hachimura as the outgoing salary. Is it now D'Lo and Gabe Vincent because he won't play, or is it which team wants him when he has a couple of years left on his deal? That'll be an interesting dynamic. If I'm the Lakers, I'm probably still trying to hold on to him, but I know Lakers fans are in love with Rui Hachimura, and I'm not a Rui Hachimura guy.
Yeah. I mean, as like a 7th or 8th guy, maybe like but yeah, I guess I would say, I don't know if it means Vincent necessarily is more likely to be traded, because this could be like, already his season is going to be, halfway lost at the very minimum. It might just be a lost season entirely. I would say it makes it more likely, and it was already likely, that the Lakers are going to make, a significant move that involves like 2 or 3 rotation guys going out. For Memphis, Marcus Smart has returned. He's back. He is not the reason they keep winning. That's John Morant being back 4-0 in his first 4 games. Luke Kennard, also left knee, remains out, but has at least been upgraded to day-to-day on the injury report, with just like, that's just the story of Kennard's career. It feels like just long stretches with foot, knee, ankle stuff that just won't go away.
Eric Spoelstra on the left calf injury that has sidelined Jimmy Butler for the Miami Heat's past 3 games. Quote, he's going to go on this road trip with us. We have another day before the next practice, 2 days before we get to San Francisco. I really don't know right now what the timetable is. We'll have a better idea by then.
Yeah, I mean, for the Warriors,
this is the Heat in the regular season, but now they've dealt with absences to Tyler Hero, to Bam, to Jimmy Butler, and they're just still chugging along.
Doesn't matter, because Duncan Robinson's good again, and they just always find a way. For the New Orleans Pelicans, Larry Nance Jr., who has not played since November 27th after he aggravated his right rib fracture, has been upgraded at least to questionable on the Pelicans' day-to-day injury report. So that's a positive, and it's especially positive for anybody that is still of the mind that you can count on him to be your closing 5 center, which I don't know if that's your plan, New Orleans. That's a little dicey, because I think you said it last week. Like, you can't count on it. You just can't count on him being available because he hasn't been.
For the Knicks, Ian Begley of SNY reports that multiple prominent is the word he used. People within the organization viewed DeJounte Murray as the ideal trade target. I think those people should be immediately fired. I like DeJounte Murray, but if you're going to keep, here's where he becomes even, I still wouldn't use the word ideal. He only becomes a good trade target if RJ Barrett and Julius Randle are not on this roster. And I will say, I don't know why you would move, if you're going to move Julius Randle just based off how he's played this season, it shouldn't be for to make room for DeJounte Murray. I find that very curious. There's also something in that report that Leon Rose is reluctant to do business though with Clutch and their clients. So that might sort of nuke any potential Murray to New York talks anyway. I saw Knicks fans not loving the idea of Brunson and Murray in the backcourt. I actually kind of like that. Again, if it was independent of RJ and Randall existing, and if it was a matter of just getting rid of RJ, sure. I mean, like if it was just straight up, like RJ in a second or something for DeJounte Murray, I'd probably give it a whirl. I mean, you're super small at that point, but he's been too roller coastery for me. It's just having him integrated into a dynamic where Randall is there too. That is not the ideal fit for New York.
I'm really like bumping on ideal is the word in here. It's just like he's so clear. Like you could talk yourself into it, like you sort of just did with a bunch of caveats. But like he's not ideal. That's insane. That's not the position they need.
His contract is good, and so from that perspective, if you were able to roll like a deal that you don't love, if it's Fournier and Barrett and stuff to get Murray and whatever, I get from an asset value perspective, but just functionally with Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle, and I'm just going to assume that RJ Barrett wouldn't be part of the team if you're getting Murray. It doesn't make sense.
And probably neither would quickly long term, right? Because you're not going to go.
Yeah, that's the other thing. It's just like maybe they're looking at it as, oh, okay, is DeJounte Murray going to end up being like cheaper than Emmanuel quickly, or so? I don't know.
Maybe. I doubt it, but well, who knows? All right, for the Orlando Magic, Joe Ingles is dealing with a sprained left ankle, has missed the last 6 games. He continues to be listed at day-to-day. Markelle Fultz has missed 22 straight as of Wednesday with left knee tendonitis. Jonathan Isaac has now also missed another 2 straight games with a hamstring issue. Any injury with him is always cause for concern just because of his history. Gary Harris missed Wednesday's game against the Sixers with a left calf injury. So Orlando's kind of going through it right now, just on the injury front. But you got
Paolo Banchero balling though.
So yeah, Paolo Banchero is balling, looking real good. Franz is coming around a little bit after that ridiculously cold 3-point shooting start. So
I don't know if I'd have to go back and look more closely at his previous seasons, but this year he just based off the way his hair looks, it always seems like he's in crisis. Just every single moment of every single game. He's just so disheveled looking.
I was, it's funny.
How's that for analysis?
I have analysis on another Wagner's hair, which is Mo, and he had like the center part going. He might still have it going. The center part, not a trend that we need to return to. Never was a good look for anybody. So just if we're going to worry about the Wagner's collective hair, I'm going to start with Mo before we get to Franz.
On Philly, Joel Embiid missed his 2nd straight game with a right ankle sprain on Wednesday night. Nick Nurse said Joel could return on Friday in Houston, though it's not definitive. Nicholas Batum has missed 4 straight games with a right hamstring issue. He's listed as day-to-day. That's a sneaky big absence for the Sixers. Mm-hmm. Batum has been good. What did you make of anything with Embiid is obviously concerning. What did you make of sort of the rumor? I think it was from Spike Eskin out there in Philly that Embiid missed the Christmas game on purpose. He said that he didn't want to play on Christmas, and then he apparently said he wanted a private plane so that he could fly to Miami the day of Christmas. There was clearly, he suffered the injury. What was it? The game against Toronto. So there was an injury. I just can't bring myself to care about it. I will say if he got the day off because he didn't want to play on Christmas, that would be mega fucked up to me.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem like that was the case.
Yeah. It's just really weird that a superstar player on a team run by Daryl Morey would get preferential treatment on off days and private planes and stuff.
Yeah. What message does that send to the team that he was good? I understand I'm not in the Sixers locker room and Joel Embiid is beloved in Philly and maybe has reasons for hey, I want to be home for Christmas. What message does that send to the team? Well, no, all you guys are going to miss Christmas Eve and Christmas, but Joel can get Christmas morning and then we'll charter him a private jet just because it's just come on.
It worked with James Harden. What could go wrong? What could go wrong, dude?
How many rings? How many finals appearances does Morey have with James Harden?
The only reason I gave that report any credence was because Morey was involved. And it's this is what he does. He lets his guy do whatever he wants. The fact that he
missed his 2nd straight game, though, is all right, well, so what are we doing here?
I agree. This is something for the Phoenix Suns. Kevin Durant is reportedly frustrated, according to Woj, who mentioned the lack of supporting assets, iffy supporting cast, and lack of assets to improve the team as possible reasons for Kevin Durant's reported discontent. You know what my suspicion is about Kevin Durant's reported discontent? He's always fucking discontented. That's his operating default setting. He's just never happy wherever he is.
And it's always sort of, if this is true. So I want to give Kevin Durant, this isn't coming from Kevin Durant, but his discontent is often tone deaf. The Warriors aren't your team. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. Right. Steph Curry exists. Oh, what's going on in Brooklyn? There's no continuity. Yeah, no shit. You hitched your wagon to Kyrie fucking Irving. And then they have no assets and the supporting cast is sort of makeshift.
How did they run out of assets exactly?
You demanded a trade to one team and they gave up everything to get you. And whether it's not necessarily his fault that they gave up the farm, but it's like you didn't play the Bradley Beal card where you acted like you had a no trade clause. Bradley Beal actually had one. So just, dude, come on. I'm going to say maybe he's not actually, he was balling at one point, but you know what? If he is frustrated, try defending better this year, Mr. Kevin Durant. That would be my advice.
I'm so like caught in a spot with him where, because he does seem like a thoughtful, like interesting guy that a lot of times seems to have like pretty good perspective, like as far as like how important this basketball thing is. Like no one can ever question like how much he cares about it too, even though he will admit like it's not life like that. Like he says a lot of things that make you sort of, I don't know if refreshing is the right word, but make you feel like I kind of agree with how he approaches the world. And then like this shit specifically with just like wherever he is, no matter how tailor-made or how much influence he's had on creating the situation that he's in, which tends to be a lot because he has that much clout. It just like, it feels like a matter of time before it's just like, no, this isn't it either. It's just like, I feel like we were saying this in Brooklyn of like, what's the constant? The constant is just like Durant. He's the one that's like somehow disruptive and like unhealthy for the franchise. I don't know. It's
the vibes in Dallas with Kyrie, even since last season, have felt better since the vibes in Phoenix with Kevin Durant. And it's just, is this guy a morale killer somehow? And I agree with everything you said. He's relatable. He's at least accessible on social media. And I don't want to pretend to know the guy from watching him a million miles away for his career. But the fact that we have enough reporting along these lines, not necessarily since he joined Phoenix, but in general, the course of his career, where there might just be something to this. And it's maybe he's trying to figure out what he actually wants.
Clearly.
Which I can respect. But if he's actually frustrated because Phoenix has a makeshift supporting cast and a lack of trade assets, it's buddy.
Come on. Well, and just like the Suns did an objectively incredible job building this team with no assets to do it with. Like all we talked about all offseason was all great minimum signings, super creative. Like let's give away shares of our pick swaps to just like let's go get second rounders somehow by like the Suns have gone above and beyond to like figure out how to have a functioning team after giving up everything to get Durant and Beal. And it's like, you said it right, buddy. Like, what do we do? What do we do? Like, what do you want? Oh man.
So, and this will be our final news item, notable. And for anyone who's wondering why we don't cover like end of the bench, or this is just the most notable news items I could find, or that I deemed notable. Grant didn't really have a say in how the doc was built. I apologize.
I think if anything, there's too much here. We should have just done the Kevin Durant thing for 40 minutes.
Don't worry, we're going to get back to Kevin Durant. Don't you worry. So the Raptors, according to Woj, quote, aren't there yet with regard to trading OG and Siakam. So it's late at night, and so I'm going to use this analogy. So anyone who's listening with children in the car, do you know what this phrasing, turn it off or skip it or lower the volume, whatever.
I'm so excited. I don't know what you're going to say.
Do you know what this analogy reminded me of? Is like the overly self-conscious partner who's in bed asking the other one, are you there yet? No. Are you there yet? No. And that's what it's become with these Toronto Raptors negotiations, where it's all these teams require like, are you ready to trade these guys? Like, no, we're not there yet. So the phrasing, that's where my mind went to. I don't think they should be there, but at the same time, it's like, this is how this stuff works. These guys aren't getting traded by the end of 2023. Like, it's just not, it's not happening. It should have happened over the offseason if they were going to do something. And just the Siakam stuff, the reporting about there's the date because he could technically sign an extension before free agency if he's traded by a certain date. I just don't buy into it, because if he's willing to sign an extension with you, he's willing to re-sign in free agency with you. And so that doesn't put like a hard stop date on it. The player who interests me the most, because so many teams want him, is OG. Because if I'm the Raptors, I objectively don't trade him if I'm trying to rebuild around Scotty Barnes. However, this operates under the guise that he wants to be there, because he's not a restricted free agent. He will opt out. He will become an unrestricted free agent and could just leave. And so you need to have a really good pulse on what he's going to do if you're the Raptors, because if you decide not to trade him and you let this guy
Yeah.
walk for nothing. That is, I think Siakam is the better player in a vacuum, but the Scotty Barnes fit has sort of marginalized him a little bit. If you just misread the OG Anunoby situation, it's almost worse in my mind. So if I'm the Raptors, I wouldn't trade him, but you better be damn sure, one, that he wants to come back, and two, you better not play the game of, whoa, we're not going to pay you that much. The Rockets gave you a 2-year deal with a team option? No way.
Yeah, there are more ways for Toronto to win, quote unquote, the Anunoby situation than to lose it, because they can pay him whatever it takes. They can trade him for immense value, which I like. If it's true that they could have got 4 firsts and whatever last year, like they maybe should have just done it. But
my only caveat would be if that's the Knicks and like you're looking at those Detroit and
right.
Washington picks.
But you'd sure as shit rather have that package of iffy picks or whatever than nothing. And they just got the Van Vliet lesson of like, it really can happen. Like someone can come over the top with an offer you think is too high and just get the guy. Like that absolutely can happen. And if anything, all these indications of like, oh, Anunoby might command this in trade or that, it's like, I think he's going to be a little more sought after than Van Vliet was. And so you should really be ready as Toronto to see this insane. I mean, I wouldn't even call it insane if he got just a max short-term offer or like a ridiculously big 4-year. Like you should expect that if you're Toronto.
I wonder if they're sort of looking at it as, because so many teams will be interested, that there might be, he has to be amenable to this, but some of the teams are going to have cap space. Yeah, if it's the Sixers and he's fine playing with Nick Nurse, okay, sure. A good team that has cap space. But if he wants to go to a good team, maybe they view it as, well, like they'll be signing trade offers on the table because there's 29 teams that want OG Anunoby and not all of them are going to have cap space. That is a risky game to play, though.
So scared to get to that point with him if I'm them. Like, I just don't want to be, I don't want to have to count on the market. And
again, I'm saying if you're willing to pay him and he will stay, I'm telling the Raptors not to trade him. But we now have evidence that they don't necessarily have a pulse on what their players are going to do.
Yeah, the lines of communication are a little staticky based on Van Vliet getting away. Yeah.
So let's talk about the biggest regrets for every team in the Western Conference. As just a brief overview of the criteria, I focused more on, there are some like sort of game moments, but I didn't go towards injuries just because we all regret injuries unless they're self-inflicted, and there is one on this that is there. I try not to focus too much on just single game moments unless they're sort of these flashbulb moments. It's more transactional team building stuff, opportunities missed or not explored, leaning one way or the other, not doing something. That's how, for the most part, you approach the East when we did it. That's how I approached the West, since I'll be spearheading this. I did not consult you about the Warriors. I always feel like, you know why I didn't? And I did this on purpose, because I wanted to see if it would spark a discussion about whether you agree or disagree. But I always feel like I'm going after you like as a sounding board, and then you very rarely are concerned about like, well, what does Dan think here? Because you just know so much shit. That's like, well, why would I want Dan's opinion on that?
What do you mean? I ask you Nick's stuff all the time.
Well, I'm saying that's not an insult. I go to you more to like bounce ideas off of for stuff that doesn't have to do with the podcast than you do. You're more independent. I'm very much a clinger, I think, is what we're getting at.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I want to reveal too much, but like, I definitely think in this job, it's really easy to find yourself like, where's the smart person? I'm going to parrot that. And I definitely have fallen into that for stretches over the years. And so I really try hard to just be like, what do I think about this? And then maybe it's also laziness, because then I just like don't cross check it with people who are smarter than me. But I'm erring on the side of trying to have my own thoughts on stuff more often lately. It's too easy. There's too much out there that you can just read and be like, that's the correct opinion. I will adopt that, you know? I
find myself wishing we podcasted more often so that we could do the thing where we respond to this stuff without having heard other noise. But it's just like, we're throwing out 2 pods. We throw out 3 pods a week, only 2 of which we're doing together. It just doesn't work out that way. So are you ready? And to see whether I mess up the alphabet, and like, we have to skip teams. So this is not, anyone who listens to this podcast knows this is a big lift.
Yeah. So, we'll just see how it goes. I'll try to correct any alphabetical stuff, but I might just let you sink out there if you go from like D to Q or something.
I'm just going to jump around. How about I just go out of, what if I just did any order I wanted? You want to try that?
Do it. I'll just make sure you count to 15. Make sure you get 15 teams. So you got to, that's all.
I have a doc with my notes on this. So I'm going to bold and unbold. So I'll bold the ones that I do. This is so stupid.
I'm not looking at the doc. So you're flying blind. I can't help you.
I did. I will say very quickly too, I did crowdsource some of these on teams that I struggled with. I didn't always agree with what or go with what they said, but I will shout out people that might have helped me or
Oh,
pointed me
good.
in the direction of something I wasn't considering. This, however, is not a team that I consulted on. We're going to begin with the Dallas Mavericks just because I have them queued up in the timestamp, Doc. So I alluded to this. They actually have very few like 2023 regrets because they had a pretty good offseason. I think, and like you could talk about some people like, well, why would they have tanked last year? Just so you end up with Derek fucking Lively. That's why, who's just perfect for this team. I think it's not getting Grant Williams. It's giving up the 2030 pick swap to get him. You've already benched him. He has proven not to be the defensive guy that you thought he was going to be and that we all knew he wasn't. Like, he is malleable. He is switchable. He's not locked down. And he's not, I still get a kick out of how it was framed. They get a lockdown wing defender. And it was like, no, that is absolutely not what Grant Williams is. He's been moved to the bench. That's fine. He still played a bunch of minutes in his first game off the bench. And I also recognize he was a contingency because they went after Matisse Thybulle first. But you've now hard tapped yourself and you've given up a 2030 pick swap. And it's like, how much did Boston really want this guy? They weren't even really playing him when it mattered most until the players said something. Could you have gotten him for less? And I'll just say that pick swap, because you can only trade one tangible first round pick, is like a pretty big deal in the realm of if you wanted to compete with offers for people who actually address your concerns of, well, can we get two-way supporting cast members who fit the bill of like the 2, 3, 4 guys. Whereas, yes, we have Dante Exum and Derek Jones Jr. right now, but Derek Jones Jr., I think his offensive limitations are going to be exploited in the playoffs. We've already seen a pullback there. And then we have to see if Dante Exum continues to be this good in the playoffs. If you're looking to get in the running for other guys, and I'll say not OG Anunoby, you don't have enough to get him, but if you wanted to enter the Jeremy Grant sweepstakes or a Kyle Kuzma sweepstakes, like, do you have enough to get him? Maybe you still do, but that 2030 pick swap would have come in handy, or at the very least, hey, it's nice not to have traded away control of just our entire draft through that year, which is what they are going to flirt with if they make another trade. And so I don't know if you have a better one. It's not, I think some people be like, well, should they have done the Olivier Maxence Prosper pick with the Rashawn Holmes thing? And I still like that flyer long-term, even if he's not good yet. And it's like you said, when you did the East, I just picking the draft stuff is so weird at this point.
Yeah, I was, as you're talking, I was looking back at like, so what was the Holmes trade? Because he's just not a factor for them. It's like I don't think that rises to the
like,
level.
who are you gonna? If you look at the players that were taken after Omax, do you really love Julian Strother that much? Would you have played Ben Shepherd? I just like there isn't someone Andre Jackson Jr. is getting some minutes in Milwaukee. It's not like you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, really, like the Lively for Wallace draft night move was one that, like, at the time, I think you could justifiably criticize as like, was that really, do we need to do that? What isn't Wallace like maybe going to be it's just easier to see Wallace being like I don't know, a starter or whatever than Lively coming out of college. But I mean, Lively is clearly super helpful.
You knew Dante Exum was coming anyway.
So. Right. Yeah. There's not a lot of regrets there, to your point.
So there are no alternatives from you on that one?
No. I was going to do the Holmes trade, but it wasn't bad enough.
So I'm going to go to the LA Clippers next, in part because why is it so weird that was it weird that I struggled with this team? And my first inclination was to say that they should have pulled off the James Harden trade sooner because just look at how much they're rolling and it would have given them more time together. But I was also wondering if by playing it the way they did they get him at a lower cost? Like if they had traded for him over the offseason, let's say, would it have cost them Terrence Mann? And then I'm also looking at it as, well, could they have gotten like Marcus Morris Sr. off this roster sooner? And then I'm like, okay, yeah, that would have been better. Maybe if you go back to last season and say, well, you should have pulled the ripcord on Marcus Morris Sr. minutes sooner. What does that team look like? Perhaps that's worthwhile. But if you would have gotten rid of Marcus Morris Sr. sooner, would that have made the salary matching for James Harden even more difficult? So I'm going to settle on this. And I'm curious what you think. I think the right answer might be they should have distanced themselves from the Marcus Morris Sr. minutes last season more. I just don't know. How did that impact the outcome of their year when you look at what ended up happening with the Paul George injury, like in the playoffs, then eventually Kawhi? I'm settling on, do you think that, and we still have a couple days, should they have signed one of these dudes to an extension already? Because could you have gotten them in theory on more favorable terms than you would get them now because of how well the Clippers are doing and of how well Kawhi Leonard specifically has played? I don't even know if that's the right answer, just because now Kawhi Leonard is injured. He's missed the past 3 games as we record this. And so some of those concerns are creeping up again. I just wonder if by not extending them before you got James Harden, if you have now locked yourself into, well, these guys are all going to get maxes. They're all going to have player options on the back end of them. Could you have gotten some injury protection, some just more favorable returns? I'm just guessing here because my assumption would be if you could have gotten more favorable returns, maybe you would have just extended them. So I'm just going to settle on that. And if nothing else, I think you could just argue now, you would have at least, the fact that you have the 3 best free agents of the 2024 class hitting the open market is pretty problematic, just in theory. They all want to be there, so I get it. So I'm grasping at straws, and I'm wondering if there's just like a mega valid alternative that I missed.
No, I think the only way you would go with the could they have extended George or Leonard, because it seemed like, and maybe still was the right decision not to. If you could have got a 1+1, I feel like would have been just a non-starter from the player's perspective, but like 2+1, maybe you could have done and just limited some of your downside risk down the road a little bit. But I don't think those guys, either of them, would have taken anything less than just it's max or I'm walking and I'll be the best free agent in the class. So like there wasn't a lot of incentive or opportunity, even with their injury histories, to get them at like a quote unquote discount, I don't think.
I think the other thing you could argue though is because in theory the extensions would have been shorter just because the year they have left on their their contract, is that would there have been benefit to now? Well, no, if they opt out and you just got to give them like the full 4 years.
Yeah, I just don't know. It's hard for me to imagine.
I don't think could both of them sign for 5? Are they? Wow, they could.
Wouldn't you be over 38?
He'll be 33, so that won't take him through his age 38 season. And then I think Paul George is a little bit older, so maybe that's the one he'll be 34 in May. So that's the one that could bump up against the rule, because they moved it to the age 38 rule, right? I'll double check that.
I mean, you can't give either of these guys a 5-year deal. Even if age 38 rule, like notwithstanding, you can't do that. I don't think. I don't think.
Oh, wait. So it says that they turned 38 during the contract. So they would have been protected even with so they can, but still, like you could have in theory, like shaved 1 year of risk off of it.
Maybe, yeah. It's tough. It's weirdly tough. Like you said, you've had 2 teams now, Dallas and LA, where it's like mostly good job, guys. Not a lot of huge regrets there.
It is sort of just both. The other thing you could do is just both seasons. I would have to look at when Terrence Mann became like a staple in the starting lineup last year, but it's like, why did it take so long to get to Terrence Mann starting here?
Yeah.
Like he started in November of this year, and that was because he was injured to start the year. So this would be dating back to last year, and his first game when he became like a starting lineup staple last year was, it was later than it should have been, but it was by the end of, no, he wasn't. He didn't even, it was like, no, it was January. So that wouldn't even have worked. I mean, maybe relying on Terrence Mann more could be another one though.
What was the Bones Highland trade? They didn't give up anything to get him, did they? It was like a second or something.
No, so I thought that was a fun.
Not a regret. You do that every time, even if Bones doesn't amount to anything. It was worth it.
Another team that I struggled with, because it's just, I feel like there's a ton of options here, but you need to back up each and every one. And then there's always the caveat, well, look at what their top 6 are if they're healthy. Fact of the matter is they're just not healthy enough. And I don't think that they have, the bigger thing for me is I don't think this team has chosen an identity, and that's the New Orleans Pelicans. And in the sense of, I think you should have this is so vague. I ended up saying you need to have leaned into offense more. And I'm not saying they should have predicted that Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram would be closer to, is this spicy? Are they closer to top 50 guys than top 20 guys right now?
I mean, if you're pricing in their like health track records, I don't know. I think you'd say both of them are closer to because if you're talking top 50, they're right in the middle. I don't know. Maybe that's copping out.
The fact of the matter is both of them are closer to top 30 than either one of them are closer to top 15 now. And you need that top 15 guy. In the absence of having that, I'm not saying you should have moved Zion or BI, and it gets into so difficult. You like a lot of the personnel on this roster, but why weren't you more aggressive this offseason in going after the space creator up front with Zion? I'm not even talking about just a shooter, but like a pancakey screen center to help you create space and who will also protect the rim. Or if you weren't going to go that route, could you actually get, I'll say, a floor stretching big where they're going to take more than like 3 attempts per 100 possessions or be more available than Larry Nance Jr.? Could you have, the other thing is, could you have been more aggressively sought? Yeah, we talk about the 3-point shooting volume. Where do you want that to come from the lineup? Who are they replacing? It would have needed to have been higher end. That's kind of what I'm getting at. And I'll touch on that again very quickly. I would say, should you have then invested more in like an actual lead guard just because of the way that you've like changed the way that you've used Zion at points where it feels like, because it doesn't seem like you trust him as much to run the show? This is all anecdotal. Something's just off with this team. And I will say Willie Green seems like he gets a little too cute with some of his lineups where it looks like he's trying to prioritize either defensive effectiveness or versatility. And it's just better offense is going to be the key here. And we had someone in Discord, I think it was Rome 8180 site, that they've lost a lot of close games. That's going to be part of it. I know Shamit Dua from the In the Know newsletter has talked about this as well. Like them struggling in close games. They're 16th in points scored per possession. Even factoring in some of the injury stuff they've dealt with this year, the talent on this roster, like you should be better than that. And so you needed to lean into it one way or another. And I do think a lot of that probably had to happen outside of the team, but there's probably also things that you could do with the current roster that would more so jibe with leaning into offense.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Did you think at all about I don't know how close it ever was, but the Zion or Ingram for the number 3 pick in Portland? Like, did you consider that way? Maybe that wasn't like legit enough ever.
I just don't know if it was legit because Portland was more prepared to draft Scoot than to keep Damian Lillard. And so it's like, what would be the point of taking on Zion at that point? Like if you were that high on Scoot that you would risk your relationship with Damian Lillard, getting Zion for him I just don't think it was ever realistic.
Yeah, probably not. All right. I got nothing to add there.
Why don't we go to Portland? Speaking of that. So I think I'm going to land on, I think I'm going to land on, this is what I land on because I penciled it in. The way the Damian Lillard era ended, just because I think you could argue the Blazers are going to be better off long-term for going through this rebuild, but they didn't really let it begin on their own terms, even though they drafted Scoot and kept that pick. And more to the point is just that it was just such bad blood with the way it unfolded, because you either made these promises behind the scenes to him and then went back on them. So you never should have made those promises in the first place, or Damian Lillard lied about them. But the fact that this played out in the media as publicly as it did with the one team trade request, they had to jump through hoops kind of to get him to approve the Bucks or the Nets. At one point, he ends up in Milwaukee. There's just something to Damian Lillard was so big, important to that franchise, to that community, did so many great things for the Blazers. Just for it to leave on such a sour note amid this, let's say, allegations of lies and unfulfilled promises, you should have been more straight up with him, or you should have just made this call more directly, because we know this for a fact. They did not, at the very least, make the call to move him until just after last year, after the Scoot Henderson pick. It was, well, what did you think was going to happen here? It felt like, this is where I land on it, is it felt like to me, they wanted him to be the one to initiate the breakup, which I just think was stupid and regrettable.
Yeah, it didn't need to go that way. I think it definitely could have been, maybe if there had been just some more frank conversations about like, here's what we want to do. You're obviously not on board with that, right? Like, can we, as far as a rebuild, can we just agree on a course of action here? And it never felt like that happened, or at least if it did happen, it didn't seem like the Blazers were consistent about like adhering to that. Because like the other thing, I thought that nothing rises to the level of kind of, I mean, the Blazers ended up doing well, like in the Lillard trade, but the optics were bad. But like the Jeremy Grant contract, I feel like is something worth mentioning. It's not on the level of like, you kind of like let the franchise icon leave on like not the best terms. Like that's a real regrettable thing. Jeremy Grant is like, you can trade him eventually.
You would still get first round value for Jeremy Grant. It just felt, and this goes beyond just the Lillard thing, it felt very much the writing was on the wall that you needed to enter this rebuild, and yet you still entered it on the fly, off the cuff, like not by your own design necessarily.
Yeah. You probably should have moved on from not moving on from Chauncey Billups, probably. Like if you're going to go, I mean, I think that's
like, what
that's
are you,
when, not an if. You might as well have done it if you're going to start the rebuild.
That's fair. That might be something just to monitor after the season, because you're still playing so many vets at this point, or guys that maybe don't factor into the long term. Next team, let's go to the Thunder. So I did consult our friends at the Uncontested for this, and I appreciate their input, and I am not going to accept it, and I'm going to go my own route. But they suggested one. I just don't think one of the ones I just don't think was a big deal enough. They said they should have traded Poku and Trey Mann by now to capitalize on their value. I think at worst you missed out on like maybe we got like 2 seconds and one of them's protected.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I just can't get on board with that as being a big regret. And it speaks to, I think the team doesn't have a ton of options for regret. The other one they gave me is the way that they played in the playing game versus the Timberwolves last year. That's certainly up there. I just think like, oh, okay, Josh Giddey playing like dog shit in that game was just kind of predictable and maybe sort of a glimpse into what is going to happen in playoff games with him. And I think it sort of dilutes how well the Timberwolves were able to play. And I know Anthony Edwards didn't have like the greatest game there, but Rudy Gobert was kind of a monster. So I didn't want to go that route. I also, the Josh Giddey stuff, the allegations of him having an improper relationship with an underage female, that is awful. I don't know what the Thunder could have done to prevent that. They apparently knew about it beforehand. Do they regret how they handled it? I don't think we have enough information for me to go there, which is why I didn't pick it. I also think the whole move on from Josh Giddey, you couldn't reasonably do that after the season he had last year, just looking at on the court without knowing what you have in Chet and just like understanding this team more. Now his value is at an nadir. And so can you be mad at them for not moving him? I'm going to settle on, it's pretty basic and we've talked about it. Maybe you should have had more faith though in this core to say, hey, let's go upgrade like the shooting with a top 8 player or the heft and bounce up front because we're such a bad rebounding team. You had the cap space to do that. You had the assets to go do that. I'm not saying it needed to be this nuclear trade. And maybe now you've set yourself up to go get Larry Markkinen this trade deadline. Spoiler alert, no, they haven't because the Thunder just don't do that. Yeah. And so I'm saying their biggest regret should be not trusting what they had off of last year's sample size more. And that I'm not saying it needed to be someone who cracked their starting lineup, but maybe someone who you could have subbed in for either Lou Dort or Josh Giddey, who opens up the half court with his 3-point volume and is maybe a little bit better off defensively than Isaiah Joe, or just is going to give you more rebounding next to Chet, like some hefter bounce up front. It's a tiny regret, but I think the level at which they're playing at right now, where they're contending for a top 2 seed in the West, and the fact that they've lost, they did just beat the Timberwolves, but they've lost to a handful of really good West teams. We have to start talking about them on the level of nitpicking, and this would fall under the context of nitpicking. So shout out to the Uncontested pod. You guys are great. I did not heed your advice.
Yeah, I mean, they nitpicked harder than you, which is just another testament to like this position this franchise is in. There's not a lot. Excuse me, I'm choking on my Thunder thoughts here.
Don't get emotional. I know how you feel about Poku,
but you when we talk about the Thunder, man, I just, I can't hold it together. I think I would have. I think you're right. I would just have framed it like maybe more broadly of the idea that like you're gonna have to do something with all these picks eventually, because it just, by the time they come rolling around, like they'll actually have quantifiable value. Like, oh, this pick's going to be 29th or whatever. Like, that's just not the same in terms of a trade asset as one that has all this unknown, value attached to it. So whether that's for Markkinen and whether that's to have what you said, I think is right. It's just, I think these picks just can't hang around forever. I think now clearly, as you're contending for being the best team in the West, is the time to like cash them in. Or even in the off season, even though it would have been harder to know for sure how good you were going to be then.
It could have been like a small cash in. And I don't have the name, but like they should have. I mean, we could look at their cap space. Like this is a team where it's okay. Like PJ Washington might have helped them on the glass, and look at what he ended up signing for in Charlotte. Could you have made a different trade where, okay, you're not getting compensated for taking on this money, but you're giving up a small asset to then take on someone who's going to give you just some heft and bounce up front. And it's easy for me to say that without naming that player. But there probably would have just been guys who were I'm going to tell you this right now. I wouldn't have minded if they just took on Clint Capella's money. The Hawks were trying to dump him. That would have been something that they could have done. So I'm not saying that specific player is why they should regret it. After watching Grant Williams this year, I liked him in OKC a little bit. Now I'm like, they didn't really miss out on too much there. So
yeah.
Next team, the Utah Jazz. This is with the caveat that I was a pretty big fan, or at least I supported this trade. They have to regret using their flexibility on John Collins. And I'm going to say they have to because Andy Larson reported of the Salt Lake Tribune that they do regret doing it, that they've been frustrated with him at both ends of the floor and are looking to move him. I think when you look at this roster now, it always set the tone for how it would be a little confusing with the front line with John Collins there, but it felt like it would be in a good way. And now I'm kind of at the point where it's like, there might have really been something to John Collins being on steroids and no longer being on steroids, and now he's not good anymore type logic.
Is that a thing?
He got suspended. I don't know what the actual substance was, but he had that 25-game suspension for the ban.
Forgot all about that.
But however, I do think having him there has now capped the development reps for Taylor Hendricks. And more to my point here, and this doesn't have to be, this could be actually exclusive of the John Collins trade. You should have gotten a veteran floor general in here, and that should have been the money that you kind of look to. I'm not saying it needed to be your floor general of the future, but like you certainly could have. I mean, you did draft Bryce Sensabaugh. Like, could you have like tried to use those picks and moved up and you gotten in on the Case and Wallen sweepstakes, or even like, I mean, Kobe Buffkin's injured right now, so that's just not a great example at the moment. Should you have been like, oh, can we move up to get like Anthony Black? Is he even that type of player? I love Taylor Hendricks, so I don't think like that's not what my issue is. But I think it comes back to the John Collins trade, where either you could have used that flexibility in a trade to get someone on like even if you rolled it over into this season, like it's going to be a lot harder to use John Collins' money to go out and get a point guard who becomes available than it would have been to just absorb them into cap space. Would there have been that trade available for you over the offseason, or could you have just spent that money? Look, this could have been, they weren't going to max him out. So Fred VanVleet's a bad example, but they should have been a team that was more, that's someone who's perfect, where they're a veteran. They don't infringe upon what you're trying to do with the youngsters. And I love Keontae George. I think it's good he's getting these reps. He's also not a good NBA player right now for what he's being asked to do. And that's fine. I think that's the regret. And I think it's a minimal regret based on where they're at with their rebuild. I am curious. I think some people might have gone here that they didn't lean into the tank sooner last year. And they did it early because the trade deadline is so early, but like you kind of missed your chance on Wemby. And now you are in this weird space for your rebuild in which, well, if the guy isn't marking in Walker Kessler or Keontae George as your guiding force, well, then how the fuck are you getting this guy?
So my overriding thought was exactly that. Like, you had a chance at this. Last year was the year to tank if ever there was going to be one. But like, part of the problem is that like, starting in 2022, they were too good. So like almost there, because all we did last year was talk about how it's like, it's too late. They banked too many wins. They're not going to get up to the lottery odds they need. So that's the only reason I wouldn't go with that. Because like, if you're thinking biggest possible picture, it's 100% that they did not position themselves to get Wembanyama. Like that is it. Because the other stuff, the point guard was the other one I thought of. Just, we both like George, but yeah, someone to just be an actual point guard that's not Jordan Clarkson or Horton Tucker or Chris Dunn or
like, how did you, like, you could have gotten in on the Tyus Jones sweepstakes already.
Sure. Like, you could just, I don't know, beat the market on Trey Jones. Like, he was a free agent. Go get one of the Joneses. So that either one of them would have been a perfectly capable, stopgap guy. That's just like what they are. But yeah, so the tanking one is the most intriguing one, but I feel like it falls a little bit out. I mean, although you could have just tanked really hard after January 1st last year. That might be it.
Did. That might be January 1st. Yeah. All missed on. I do think there was some internal misevaluation though, because we all assumed that they were going to suck from day one last year. And I think they ended up having, like, no one expected what Larry Markkinen did for starters. That was a big one.
Or Kessler. Because Kessler was a huge positive.
Malik Beasley got off to a hot start. Walker Kessler was good right away. Yeah. They did not understand how good they were going to be in the interim.
Clearly not. And I had the feeling all year, or at least early on, that like they didn't want this to be happening. Like, not only did they not expect it, I think probably because they all had to, they saw the showcase games in Vegas where Wembanyama was like, okay, well, this is the guy. Like, I'm sure they were like, God, like such a mixed emotional bag.
We're winning. Scoot.
Yeah.
Like, I love Keontae George, but I don't think he's going to be better than Scoot.
No. Yeah. I mean, if we're really going to go a little bit outside the 23 thing, it might have to be that one for me.
I just didn't want to go too far outside 23. And the other one that you could say is like, could we get some actual wings on this roster? But
yeah,
I'm going to move on to the Spurs just so that I can mention this. I almost picked it for one of them. I still think Utah and/or San Antonio should be ashamed that they didn't force the Lakers to pay more for Austin Reeves.
Yeah.
There should have been some type of poison pill. They are the teams that should have done it, but I didn't want to. I don't know if that was a missed opportunity. maybe more so for the Spurs, who could use some just this. I don't really like this word anymore because it's become such a buzzword and cliche, but connectivity on the offensive end. However, go ahead. You're going to say something?
Reeves could just be your point guard. Like if you're not like just if he's on the Spurs, I think you put the ball in his hands and everything has would have gone better than it has this year. But sorry, go ahead.
I picked, and this is what I'm going to end up picking, but I'm melding it with, I consulted Noah Magaro George of the Vic and Roll. Go check out his Substack there. Does great work. I asked him whether I was being too basic with this by just saying, because we've talked about it so much, where it's your biggest regret should be either Trey Jones did not start this season as a starter and still isn't starting, or you should have went and gotten another veteran floor general who could start to optimize Wembanyama. The on-off split still with Wembanyama's efficiency compared to Trey Jones. So, like, it doesn't need to be outside the organization. Just more Wemby and Trey Jones should be your biggest regret. What he said was interesting, and so I will tack it on to this, and it was not something I thought of. You should have considered using some of your draft equity, that Charlotte pick, that Raptors pick, could you have gotten a Case and Wallace in the draft? Could you have gone after a Keontae George? Could you have done something like that? So if you weren't going to go we don't want a veteran floor general in here, well, then get a young fucking point guard in here that's not Jeremy Sohan. And I understand that there's value in experimenting, and they're still doing it. They've changed their starting lineup again, and Trey Jones still isn't in it.
Yeah.
But at some point, it just feels counterintuitive. They're at that point. And so maybe the overarching regret is not catering more towards Wemby's offensive optimization and focusing more on experimentation and self-discovery, which, I'm a pretty big fan of teams going through the self-discovery process. Yeah. We've now been at the point with the Spurs where it's no, buddies. It's not, to use the word, buddies. It's not working.
Yeah, I don't know. The more you think about the Spurs and what they're doing, it almost seems like they're like trying a little too hard to innovate. Or just like, yeah, we've got this guy that no one's ever seen before. We might as well see if you don't actually need a point guard, right? We might as well just see if having Wembanyama means you can just totally think outside the box as far as how you put a roster together and how you put a lineup on the floor, which, like, I'm never going to hate that, just because eventually we will see, like, hey, remember when teams used to have point guards? We'll like be talking that way at some point. But so, like, the Spurs kind of tinkering with that is interesting to me. But yeah, it's the Reeves thing, because Reeves would sort of have allowed you to have it both ways. He's not really a point guard, but he's like,
so you want to settle on them not poison pilling Reeves?
Well, it's kind of it's all the things you're talking about, because it does address the point guard thing. It allows them to be a little weird and a little creative with their starting and closing lineup if they want to, because he's not a Trey Jones type. He's not just a game manager. He could be different than that. So maybe, I guess it's all kind of one thing. It's the point guard thing. It's the poison pill thing. It's the not using your draft capital to go get somebody. I guess it's all kind of related.
I still think, and I think I mentioned this more from the NBA podcast, one of my favorite fake trade proposals would be, does that Raptors pick get you Emmanuel quickly? Would it have gotten it over the offseason? Would it get it now? I know you still have to, the fact you have to pay him, turn around and pay him, I think makes it tough. But with the Knicks having Dante DiVincenzo, I don't know. Maybe. Makes it interesting.
Yeah.
I'm still like, I don't mean to harp on this. I pride myself in really having a pulse on what all 30 teams would like on every situation we talk about. I hate my Pelicans one still. I just have, like, for a team that I'm so high on, I just feel like I have a lack of feel for like what they should or could be doing, because everything you list with them just has like this ripple effect of, well, yeah, but like, there's like too many counter caveats.
That's just the nature of that roster, I feel like, where it's like they got a bunch of one-way guys that you can throw out in certain combinations and it looks incredible sometimes, and other times it makes no sense. They got two stars that don't fit together, but they're both individually very good, and also sometimes not a bit. Like, it's just the whole team is difficult to sort of wrap your head around. I don't think you're alone, is what I'm saying on that one.
You know what team is not so difficult to wrap your head around? The Los Angeles Lakers. Like, we just went through the two teams that we think should have poison pilled Austin Reeves, and let's focus on the team that actually has Austin Reeves. So I thought I gave this as soon as the news came out about Gabe Vincent missing time. Do they regret, like, you're hard capping yourself to get a Gabe Vincent and now you don't have him? I still think I'm going to frame it this way. I don't want to focus on they should have traded Russell Westbrook sooner, because we're talking about 4 weeks. Are those 4 weeks in 2023 because that spills into, we just talked about with the Jazz, that spills into like, they never should have made the trade in the first place. They should have moved off of them in the offseason. So if you want to pick that, that's fine. I will roll into this. Why? And I will also preface it with this. I was wrong because I was so high on D'Angelo Russell at the time. Why was Mike Conley not in LA after why did we need the Timberwolves to get involved here? Like Utah had Malik Beasley, Utah had Mike Conley. Why did we need the Wolves? Did we need the Wolves to be a part of this? I get that you probably didn't want to kill Alexander Walker, but why was you I think you did it because you prioritized D'Angelo Russell would be the answer, right?
It has to be, which is a mistake. I think pretty clearly. Unless you'll see what they get for him because they signed him to trade him. So maybe that changes. But we're talking about the past.
But Mike Conley would be, and I did consult friend of the pod, Jabari Davis, producing a bunch of good podcasts right now, and love him. I just it is I keep thinking about it. I feel like I'm oversimplifying, but I went back, I looked at the transactional. How would the money work? Folding Mike Conley into the Lakers trade would have been so easy. It would have been so easy just to excommunicate the Wolves from the entire negotiations.
And where would they be now? Because Conley has mattered so much for them. Like, talk about.
Is it a stretch to say he is their third most important player?
He's their hardest one to replace.
Maybe.
I think they don't have a replacement for him. I don't know if that what that says about your question specifically, but I think about that all the time. Of the Wolves are like our one of our no notes teams in the West, or one of mine. They've kind of become that, except for if Conley goes down, then you're just like, I don't know. I guess our playmaking is coming from Edwards, and like Kyle Anderson plays more now. Like that's what we're doing. Jordan McLaughlin's going to get minutes. Conley's been huge and would have been phenomenal for the Lakers. Better than Russell, I think.
Yeah, and I think he would have provided even the Conley, no Anthony Edwards units have been pretty bad this year. Conley and Anthony Davis together without LeBron feels like it probably would have worked out pretty well. The other things you can focus on is why do they still just not bring in shooting in general with this roster? Even Gabe Vincent is like, that was your marquee addition, and he's not the most efficient shooter. He will take them, so there's value in that. Taurean Prince, though, that signing worked out well, but it's just like we're taking flyers on Cam Reddish, and like we're going with Jackson Hayes, who's actually played some for them, but like, why can't we just, and Christian Wood was supposed to be this floor spacer, but that hasn't worked out. I think the Conley one is correct, and if it's not him, it just has to be, January 1, Russell Westbrook should not have been on the roster.
I mean, letting Beasley go, I think that's another one. Like, if you're hard up for shooting,
I wonder that's a good one, because would he have stayed for a lot? I mean, the Bucks just picked him up on the minimum. So could you have kept him on the same thing?
You never know. And he's cooled off, but you never know if he would have been the same on this team versus the Bucks. He's been up and down, and there's a reason Beasley's bounced around quite a bit. He's always one of those guys that's younger than you think too. But yeah, I think it has to be. I didn't even think about the Conley thing as a road not taken regret. That's a great one.
Let's go to the Minnesota Timberwolves, since we spent part of the Lakers section talking about them. So I think because we called them our no notes teams, I now have more notes on them where their offense concerns me as we get into playoff settings. And so I'm like, they really should have done more to get a backup point guard and get someone who can increase their 3-point volume. But I think that is just stuff they could still address. And they were working with such thin margin. If they could have figured out a way to keep Taurean Prince on the roster, how much different do we feel about this team right now? We're pretty high on them at the moment. I ended up going, and I said I didn't do this for the most part, Jaden McDaniels losing a battle with the wall in the regular season finale, just because they really pushed the Nuggets. It was a brief first round series. Do we learn even more about the Wolves? And you just get more of a sample with your best players, just having, their top 5. And so I don't know I still don't think they would have beaten the Nuggets, but that series was really competitive. Jaden McDaniels just having his season done. I've also wondered, did they potentially save themselves some money because of the McDaniels injury? He got his extension, but it wasn't near the max. And so if he would have played, does he become a max candidate? I just think, based off what they did to the Thunder while Anthony Edwards wasn't playing that well in the play-in game, and just knowing what Jaden McDaniels can do and what they did to the Nuggets, just imagine if he was available for that series. And so I feel do you think it's okay to go with that regret, knowing that Jaden McDaniels punched a wall and that's how his season ended?
I mean, it's if you're not going to, it's such a clearly regrettable, it's the perfect kind of regrettable situation. Cause it was it was totally uncalled for and like just didn't need to happen. Like some,
It was,
oh, we didn't
and
trade
do
for
you
this
remember
guy or
why?
whatever. It's like,
It was not like, oh, end of the game, he got ejected. It was because he picked up his second foul. It was like the first quarter, I believe. And so it's just like, what a fucking stupid thing.
I will say, and the Thunder beat them soundly, and SGA got his. But watching that game, Wolves Thunder, this is last night for us, but whenever this is recording, it was on Tuesday. Uh, watching McDaniels guard SGA, the thought that entered my head was like, I'm not sure there's anyone that would be like would make you less comfortable to be guarded by than McDaniels, because like it's SGA and like he's kind of sticking with them about as well as a human being can, and is just like bothering him and reaching, and his feet are so quick for how long he is, and it's just like, yeah. So to circle back, like maybe that broken hand really did like do the Wolves a favor ultimately, because just if he had done that like on a playoff stage and everybody had seen him just looking like just a world beater defensively, like maybe he costs more. I don't know. That's all to say he just looked like vicious defensively for stretches against probably the best guard in the league right now.
Yeah. So do you have any alternatives for them? Is it just really the backup point guard or 3-point like volume shooting situation?
Well, in terms of like a need, it's just the backup point guard spot. But I mean,
That's like how big of a regret is that based on
yeah,
how well you're playing?
yeah, it's hard. It's hard to say that's a huge one.
Which team? Whoa, I almost just left our podcast room. That would have been something. Let's go to Denver. Hashtag no regrets for
Good luck.
Yeah. They won a title. But I consulted Mile High Sports' Ryan Blackburn, excuse me, on this while I was on his podcast, the Alley Oop podcast. Because I wanted to see, like, I was gonna end up on, could they have done more to get like a backup big who would actually play where they don't have to downsize? And is it the Zeke Naji extension? I ultimately think you need tradable money. And so that Zeke Naji, even right now, because of the 200% matching rules for teams under the apron, I think that there's value in that. I think I'm going to settle on, and this just speaks to how flimsy it is. They went too youth oriented as part of their bench. And it's, yes, Peyton Watson has shined. Julian Strother's had his moments. But at the end of the day, like, you have just guys who are not, Hunter Tyson, Jalen Pickett, even Julian Strother to some extent, who's not played a ton, that just aren't playing. And like, could you have gotten any of these veterans that, look at all those veterans on minimum contracts that the Phoenix Suns signed. And like, you're here sitting with like Justin Holiday, and we know it was smart. He's not on a minimum, but like to keep Reggie Jackson. Could you have gotten, I still don't know why Bismack Biyombo wasn't signed. Like, just get him you have DeAndre Jordan. I get what he does for your locker room. He's actually been good in some of the minutes he's played, but like, you can't rely on him for a ton of minutes. Again, it's tough for me to muster up the passion to be like, wow, man, they fucked up. Because I think the fact that we're here, and this might be more of an indictment on Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray than anything, to where they still just can't afford to use Jokic for even a second. There's more validity to exploring the dual timeline things, because you want to get to a point where, well, hey, if Jokic misses more than 4 games a year, like, we need to figure out a way to combat that. This is a way that you would hopefully get there, because right now it doesn't seem like they're built for it. That's the only one I could really come up with for them, is that they skewed too far for the youth movement, is because they have done something where, they gave these guys like guaranteed money to where they're not on 2-way contracts. Right. So could you have done something to have just gotten another veteran in here who, even if he's just a regular season's inning eater, like, that matters more than what you're getting from some of these guys right now.
Yeah, I mean, if we're ever going to have a no regrets team, it has to be the Nuggets. But the most significant thing that jumps out, and maybe this ties into what you were saying about just the types of players they got to fill out the supporting cast, is just the backup big. Like, they kind of did the DeAndre Jordan. They're kind of Udonis Haslaming DeAndre Jordan a little bit. Like, he's just, we want him around type of thing.
I think that's a stretch, just because he's like done something. But yeah, I mean,
just like you're not going to, I guess, like, it's, part of the problem with nitpicking about this is like, well, if Jokic doesn't play, that they're like nothing else matters anyway. So it's like, it's not like you need a backup big that's going to like save you if Jokic misses like 2 months. You're just never going to win, basically. whoever it is, at least as far as like people that Denver could realistically get. Like you can't. It'd be cool if you could go get Miles Turner to be your backup big or whatever, but like you can't because you won a title and that costs a lot of money and that's your roster. But yeah, I think just like I don't know, slightly more like consistently playable backup big that could actually start occasionally, like that kind of thing. But again, this is a no regrets team.
I'm going to move on to the Houston Rockets. And so I reached out to Red Nation Hoops' Salman Ali, friend of the podcast. And I proposed a bunch of different things. I do think this one's sort of a no-brainer, but them empowering KPJ behind the scenes is just blasphemous when you look at those rumors, how they treat him like a franchise cornerstone. I do think that speaks to the larger issue of just sort of their lack of team culture. I also do think it encompasses too much of not 2023, since he spent half of it not playing basketball or on the roster due to the domestic violence allegations. I had other ones. So there was the one, should they have pivoted to more Alperen Şengün sooner? It took them so long last season to do that. They would have had more information on that point, maybe about Jalen Green and his fit in more of a bit role. But that even didn't come to light until now we have Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks and some of these other perimeter players on the roster. Here's the one he gave me, and I considered other ones that I proposed to him. I'm going to read it verbatim. He said the Brook Lopez pursuit. And here was his reasoning. If you got Lopez, Alperen Şengün gets further marginalized. And so you still didn't understand what you had in Şengün at that point, clearly. 2, if you miss on Lopez, which you did, you made this ridiculous multi-team trade that cost you draft capital and young prospects. Because you missed, you also missed out possibly getting Dylan Brooks on a sweetheart deal. Remember, they ended up paying him more in the end. The KPG thing would sting a lot less if Houston still had Ty Washington, Usman Garuba, and or Josh Christopher on the roster, who they also moved as part of these mechanisms. And then you wouldn't need to make the eventual Oladipo trade because you've had those contracts on your books. Instead, you could have just waived KPJ right away, which is what they should have done, and kept the second rounder. He had just an overall really bad call by the front office to pursue Lopez. What do you think of that? I didn't consider it in that framing.
I did not think about the ripple effects. I would have said, like, I mean, really, the Lopez thing is one of the biggest bullets dodged, I think, in a long time. It can't be a regret because you didn't get the guy, and like, fortunately, it turned out that Şengün was beyond ready to just be your center. But I didn't think about like all the knock-on effects of that pursuit, which that's a good point. The other one I might throw in there is like you maybe took the wrong Thompson at number 4. But it's hard to judge Amen because he just hasn't played, and Asar may never be able to shoot. Like, just pick the other. I mean, maybe just swap him now. Who would notice, really? Maybe once Asar started really defending his ass off in a Rockets uniform, you might realize it was him. But yeah, I think it makes sense to sort of focus on the Lopez like non-acquisition, but I can't get all the way there with that as a regret since you didn't get the guy and that was the best thing that could have happened, really.
Well, I'm saying if you didn't go after him, like that fact you had to pay Dylan Brooks more, give up draft capital to make the mechanisms work. I think it's the KPJ thing would be the other one for me, just because if those rumors, which I think it was Clutch Fans or Clutch Points reported it, how much they empowered and just ignored his erratic, bordering on detrimental behavior behind the scenes. I'm talking pre-domestic violence allegations. It's just like, what are we doing? But I do think that also speaks to the larger symptom of, should we have gotten more adults in the room sooner here? Both players, coaches, whatever.
Well, not moving on from Steven Silas sooner, maybe. That's why. I mean, it does seem like it was beyond him. It wasn't just like he couldn't rein everything in, but like the chaos was not of his doing. He just wasn't the right guy to like control it. And maybe it was uncontrollable. I mean, not moving Jalen Green before he has like a down year in a like.
Was that after the second half of the season he had last year? Was that ever even in the cards?
No, it was. I'm just like, I think you probably have the right one, but I'm just trying to think of other potential regrets there. Because everything else, I mean, another team, like, I didn't like the Brooks deal, but like, yeah, kind of works for me now. Like he ended up being a lot better than I mean.
Yeah, we missed out. And how much better would that look if he only cost like $15 million a year?
Oh my God. Yeah. It would be one of the best contracts signed, which is like unthinkable.
Let's go to, where do we want to go to next? Who haven't I done yet?
Let's
go to
the Warriors one's going to be.
Let's go to the Sacramento Kings. No, I'm going to save that to the end just to piss you off.
All right.
So theirs might be the most basic one when we're talking about stepping on the toes of just things we've already talked about. not more aggressively looking to upgrade their defense. And there's been a lot of mixed results with their offensive returns. Again, I don't know how many times we have to cite this. De'Aaron Fox being healthy as just like their offense is just going to be, they're 12th right now. They're like, I don't know what they're 7th or something since he returned from that sprained right ankle. You look at this roster. I do think Keegan Murray's inoculated you against some criticism because of the defensive jump he's made, as well as De'Aaron Fox. I do wonder if, does Davion Mitchell have to play meaningful minutes for this team still if De'Aaron Fox isn't defending the way that he is? Probably not, because Fox will still need to play. Still, what that did was allow you more optionality to go out and be like, oh, we don't necessarily need a Harrison Barnes replacement or someone Harrison Barnes' size. I think that's ideal. We've talked about OG Anunoby for this team, probably more than any other team in the league.
Pretty close.
But could you have got, like, you could go out and get an Alex Caruso, even a Marcus Smart, if you were a part of that. It could be someone who's a little bit smaller because of Keegan Murray playing so well defensively. And yet you chose to use your flexibility on, we're going to bring back Harrison Barnes. We're going to renegotiate and extend Domas Sabonis. We're going to bring over Vezenkov, who's like had some bright spots. And there's been, when you've seen like any of the minutes with Lyles and Vezenkov on the floor together, like the Kings are very just twitchy and fun. You had an opportunity to be more aggressive. And it doesn't sound like from all the reporting, free agency doesn't seem like Jeremy Grant was ever really on the table for them. You could have been more aggressive on the trade market. There's always opportunities on the trade market that go unexplored. And I just question, like, are they going to remedy that now when we've seen Zach LaVine like linked to them for the right price they might be interested in? Zach LaVine should not be interesting to you at any price. No. I'm sorry. Like, no. He just shouldn't be. And so they're a very good team. I think that they are on the cusp of where if you get a very good defender in here who could be a part of your top 6, top 7 rotation in the playoffs, makes a huge difference. Do they need to be a part of your closing lineup? Maybe not, though that would be preferable. That was a little bit uninspiring, especially after the season they had last year.
Yeah, I think it has to be that. It has to be failing. It can't be that they failed to recognize what they needed. It was like everybody understood the type of players that they needed to sort of balance the roster out. So not really getting those guys.
This is kind of like subreddit logic of Kings fans, I think, but I saw a lot of criticism of they don't need an elite wing defender or perimeter defender because they have Keegan Murray. And it's just like, no. Sorry. No, that's not true.
I would say, even if you wanted to go even more macro, it's the idea that tied to like not knowing or not pursuing doggedly enough, like what they needed. It's this idea that we're going to talk a lot about we're not satisfied with where we are. We want to improve. We want to take the next step, but then operate as if the goal is to just make the playoffs again, which, you know what I mean? Like, which is to double down on your guys, to bring Barnes back. The Sabonis extension, I think just in a vacuum is one. I'm never going to say that was a good decision. I'm not saying he's a bad player. I'm saying that was a stupid decision. You didn't need to do it. It's too much money for that type of player. If in fact you are serious about leveling up. If you're not, and you want to just kind of keep doing this where you win 40 something games and can't guard anybody, which is what they did not say that was the goal. That's how they operated. Because if the goal was to get better, you would have figured out a way to get wing defenders to not commit yourself to Sabonis way before you needed to and for more money than you needed to. So yeah, few regrets there, but they're all kind of a piece.
The Memphis Grizzlies, this one spills into other years. It's waiting too long to make the consolidation trade, but I will say, and then you made the consolidation trade on the wrong player. I think in large part, maybe Marcus Smart plays better. He's healthy now. The pecking order is going to normalize. John Morant's sick at the moment, but like you have Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., John Morant, and Smart all together. That's how you're going to get your most valuable information. It's just, it felt like it was more in response to, well, we kind of need someone to wear all these hats. We missed on the boat on getting wings in here, but that could be Marcus Smart, who can also help offset the 25 game suspension that's coming or came at the time for John Morant. I don't love that logic in general, but I keep coming back to Keith Parrish from Fast Break Breakfast, a very good podcast. You should check them out if you haven't already. Tweeted this. This is back in November. It seems like people are open to it now, so let's reflect. Tyus Jones, DeAnthony Melton, Dylan Brooks, Kyle Anderson, 3 first-round picks, and 3 second-round picks became Marcus Smart, Luke Kennard, Jake LaRavia, David Roddy.
That's like
how many of those guys factor prominently into the Memphis Grizzlies' current plans? Because Kennard's injured, the answer is Marcus Smart, who was just injured for a bunch of time. That's go ahead.
That's a disaster. That's like a massive downgrade in value, like massive. They'd be so much better off with the first list of guys you mentioned and assets. It's not even close. That's crazy.
So you made the wrong calls time and again. I think this is something that is not just 2023, but it kind of manifested the most in 2023 because this was your all-in trade, quote unquote. Yeah. And even if you thought it was a half measure, that's even worse. Why are we taking half measures when you're a team that just finished with the second best record in the West last year again?
Yeah.
Or were they the best? No, they were the second best. Right?
Number 2. I think they've been second twice in a row, I want to say.
It's just like, I think that has to be the regret. And it's also you kind of, I was tricked by Zaire Williams too. So I understand that to a point where you've held on to your own guys just like for too much. And it's worked out with Desmond Bane and John Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. clearly, but they are always going to be the exceptions. And I get this stuff is hard, but I feel like there's probably like 2 or 3, at least 2 postseasons worth of evidence of like, we know what you need, go out and get it. And they just elected not to.
Yeah. I think that's a really good one.
The second to last one, I guess I should just save the Golden State Warriors to the end, right?
You have to now. You said you would.
And we'll see if I ended up with 15 teams, by the way. That's the other thing.
I have no idea.
I'll count once we get to the Warriors, who I think are next. So the Phoenix Suns, I'm going to be clear about this. The Kevin Durant trade negotiations. And what I mean by this is you don't need to regret the Kevin Durant trade. And for anyone who regrets the Bradley Beal trade, I understand, but I come back to with what you gave up, given how much of a sunk cost DeAndre Ayton became, what could you have gotten? Let's start there. What could you have gotten with that exact trade offer that is better than the idea of Bradley Beal coming back in February?
It's like an unanswerable question, but the point taken, like it's hard to think of something that's like definitely going to be better for what they gave up.
The Kevin Durant trade negotiation was, in hindsight, a disaster. Just because you gave everything. You were the only team on Kevin Durant's list, and you acted, I don't know if it's because Matt Ishbia just took over the team and he wanted to leave his stamp. You gave up everything. Even the reporting that's jarring, I know that he wasn't with the team, but it was just like, yeah, we need Jay Crowder, and you need to give him to us. It was just like, okay. And that was after relenting on some of the pick commitments. You couldn't have won anything on that, like keeping a first rounder, protecting these first rounders. I get that it's Kevin Durant. And I think that there's, I don't know if you saw the tweet that was going around where people screenshotted what people were talking about in Reddit, how they're just out on Kevin Durant. They think the trade itself was a disaster, and maybe just in due time, because you did give up Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson and all these vibes. You were very clearly not good enough at the time. And so the swing that you're making, I totally understand, but like you gave up everything possible, like in terms of these tangible first round picks. And you were the only team on his trade list at that time. And so to walk away with you couldn't have figured out a way to, I get not getting, like keeping Mikal Bridges would have been the dream. I get that was probably unrealistic. Like you couldn't even win with having Cam Johnson still on the roster. There was ways around the maneuvering of the money with it. So like you couldn't have gotten DeAndre Ayton shoehorned into that. Just, hey, like you guys kind of need a big. You only have Nick Claxton and Daron Sharp anyway. You gave up everything. You made all the concessions. And I think it's coming back to bite you now, to where you didn't have any long-term mainstay possibilities left on this roster. And you didn't give up, by the way, any of them in the Bradley Beal trade. And now you have this roster of makeshift veteran contracts. And part of the problem is you and I, or at least I did, I read too much into the signings. They were ballyhooed, and I jumped aboard that bandwagon. Those guys were ultimately available for the minimum for a reason. And there's also something to the effect of, I know they gave out player options, but like they're still trying to play for their next contract to not pick up those player options. And so that gets a little dicey. You couldn't have just won any aspect of the Kevin Durant trade aside from ending up with Kevin Durant. And I will say, had he had a list of destinations that were like 6 teams long, okay, fine. At that point, it's time to call the Nets' bluff. Where are you sending him then, if not here?
Yeah. I wonder, wasn't the reporting something like and maybe you reference it with the Crowder bit, but like something to the effect of, they were close or whatever, and then the Suns were trying to hold out and not give something, and Ishbia kind of comes in over the top and is just new owner enthusiasm is like, just do it, basically.
Yes.
Make this happen. So it's like, I think anytime that is a factor, it's just regrettable by definition, because clearly, like you said, make the Nets prove that, one, they have a better offer. They don't. Or two, that they're willing to hold on to him. Don't think they were. So just wait a little while, because it's not like last year was like the team in its full form. I don't think, like, it wasn't like we get Durant, we're gonna. To my recollection, it wasn't. It was more became like once, in the offseason they get Beal, and then it's like, okay, now we're really like, we're going for it. We think we're going to contend. I don't remember feeling that way last year, although maybe I'm just like forgetting about it. But yeah, just the idea that you weren't bidding against anyone and you still managed to just give up everything that you possibly could feels bad. Feels like a bad look. Don't let new owners get crazy. That's like a recipe for disaster.
Our final team, the Golden State Warriors, and I have counted. This is our 15th team, which means that it's our final team. I should count again. I'll count again while you're responding to it. So I went with. I didn't really know how to frame what could they have done to rein Draymond Green in, because that would be the obvious regret. I don't, because they've put him through this work on yourself program sooner, apparently. So if you want to go that route, or if you have a way to frame it, that would be better. I'm there. I'm settled on. They needed to, it's a combination of experiment with the youth sooner and moved away from, as Jonathan Kuminga just recently said, the OGs, not give them as long as a rope for as long. We saw it dating back to last season later. And I'm not talking about, look, we know what happened with Poole, and I know that they just got TJD and Brandon Podziemski. It still probably took them a little too long to get to those points of leaning on them. The Kuminga one and even the Moody one are big ones for me, where Moody's just kind of lost in the shuffle. Kuminga, even when he starts, doesn't play a ton. I don't get why Steve Kerr doesn't play them together. I'm sure it's because, is there enough dribbling or creation there? Dude, look at what you're working with at this point defensively. Yeah. Just play them together, especially with Draymond Green not there. And I think that you would just have more information on the youth, and maybe Moses Moody and Jonathan Kuminga would be much better off if you would actually, I don't want to say committed to the 2 timeline shtick, but you never really just plumb the depth of your youth properly. And I think that did a disservice, especially last season, more so. I get it. You won the 2022 title. You earned yourself some goodwill there. And now look, you are relying on TJD now. Pods playing really well, man. Doing all rookie teams is going to be a bear, by the way. Just think, Pods wasn't even on our first go round of it like a month or two ago. Yeah. So I get that you're doing it now. It took you too long to get there. Look at how much time you even wasted this season, where it's like, oh, we're just going to bank on Andrew Wiggins reverting back to 2022 postseason, which is the anomaly of all anomalies when you look at the rest of his career. We're going to allow Klay Thompson way too much leeway when he's hurting us. I know he's played better on offense lately, but you need, and I think this still could end up being a regret, where should you have a tougher stomach with some of the OGs, where it's like, no, you guys aren't going to close, when you're like, you guys aren't guaranteed a closing spot. I think we're getting to that point. I get it's tough discussions to have. The only other one that I think you could go with is, could you have addressed some of these more organically and saved face by we made the consolidation trade. And so this is just how it is. This player is clearly better. We're not investing in youth, but we went out and we traded for Pascal Siakam, or we went out and we traded for OG Anunoby, or we went out and traded for Bradley Beal or something.
Yeah, I think I agree with just sort of the general idea that the team has kind of gotten it wrong with the balance of trusting the youth and then sort of honoring, or whatever the word we should use is, the veterans. Because Moody, take Moody as an example. He was told just the other day, you're out of the rotation now, which just keeps happening to him, even though all he ever does is just be solid, and sometimes better than that. And then Kuminga getting jerked around and pulled out of games in ways that other guys just don't. The Warriors put up with Poole doing just absolute nonsense for most of last year. And Kuminga would get yanked for missing a rotation, whereas Poole is just I don't know, meandering around 3 rows into the stands on defense instead of just doing anything. And look, he sort of earned it. he did earn it as a contributor to the title team in ways that I guess Kuminga and Moody didn't really. Although, like, even Moody, you remember those finals, Moody was playing and Kuminga was really good, like down the stretch of that season. So I agree they mismanaged that. I think also related to that is like, this is barely a 2023 thing, but like not trading James Wiseman sooner, just because every second they kept him, his value went down. So, I mean, if you traded him January 1 of 23, you're probably not doing any better than they did at the deadline, because it was clear that he was not going to be a good player, but that's one of them. But yeah, I think just the general
mishandling of youth in general, that was great
Yeah.
to encompass the James Wiseman trade.
I think it's all part of the same thing, where it's like, and even now, I think this is beyond the scope of what we're talking about, but you saved it for last. This is your fault. Even now,
I just want to point out, though, I would have also, you did yours in under an hour. I would have done mine in under an hour if you weren't.
Except for this, I'm going to wreck it. I'm concerned about when Draymond comes back, because there's a very specific way that the vets play, like the ball pinging around the top, the handoffs, waiting for guys to come off pin downs, and every defense in the league is attuned to it. And I think it's a huge reason the Warriors turn the ball over like crazy, is because there is no mystery to what they want to do when they play with the vets. Like, I'm concerned that will return, because now it's like a little more like, kind of, I don't know, they play a little more like other teams, which when they don't have Draymond and Looney at the top doing the whole shtick, that doesn't work as well anymore. And that might change again. And that's just another instance of like, the youth is not being served here, because things make more sense when you have Podziemski and Kuminga just kind of running around, being athletic, like doing stuff that is very much outside the Warriors, like quote unquote system that they use with the vets. So like, they're not through, I guess, is the point here, kind of trying to navigate the old guys, young guys thing. Like that is going to be a thing in 2024 still.
And I think it feels weird to say it now when Pods and Kuminga and TJD are playing, but you kind of mentioned it. Well, what's going to happen when Draymond Green comes back? Really, with Kuminga and TJD are the ones that you look at there.
Right. Which guys, like, they've earned minutes. They just straight up have earned minutes in ways some of the vets have not. And the track record has been like, well, that doesn't matter. That has been what's gone on. Although, I mean, to Kerr's credit, Wiggins is going to have to do very little to like get his minutes back, but he did take him away for a little bit there. So that, and Looney too, like Looney's been bad. He's taken his minutes away. So that's
also
positive
to like the new front office's credit, like to end up with Pods and TJD in the same rookie class is
really good.
This is good, but it's still just, there's an awkwardness. And if you don't want to frame it this way, I think then the only answer is, well, then you should have made a real consolidation trade already. Not like Chris Paul was kind of I still think that wasn't a bad move.
Made sense.
But it was as an asset play, but just like, it wasn't a consolidation trade.
No, I think Podziemski playing as well as he has should make the Warriors consider moving Paul as part of a bigger deal, just because like ultimately Paul's role is just not going to be that big, and shouldn't be, because he can't play heavy minutes over a long stretch. And Podziemski just keeps winning the minutes he's on the floor. Like, I don't know how much more you need to see before you turn it over to him.
I think I'm at the point where I would prefer to trade Andrew Wiggins and roll with Jonathan Kuminga, and let's up his role. And let's also see who you get back in the Andrew Wiggins trade. I think Chris Paul's contract is definitely more pliable in negotiations because it's technically expiring. So that is like something to certainly, but if you find a team that's just like Andrew Wiggins isn't super old and like he can be, we saw what he was in 2000. If you find a team that kind of values him as like even a fringe or like a protected first round pick, and you're using his salary on top of other picks, if that ups your return, I'd prefer to move him and just like increase Jonathan Kuminga's role / let's see who we're getting back as part of this deal.
The combination of Moody, Podziemski, and Kuminga the Warriors have like a roster glut issue as it is. The three of those guys should, especially if Wiggins ever got back to finals Wiggins, like, then that's different. But I don't think that's happening. And those three guys can contribute what he would have, just in different ways.
Let's get to stat padding. Let's do, I think both of us only have, you said like 2 separate things. I say we do that and get out of here. It's very late, and this is like the 3rd straight week we've done every team series. And so, I'm fucking tired. I'm not going to lie. I love doing this, but I'm exhausted. I don't know how you feel.
I took a long nap today, just because that's how I live as a grown adult.
You and Bert? all snuggled up.
Taking a nap. It rained here today too, so I was in a napping kind of mood. I have to take a nap if I'm going to be like halfway coherent at this hour. It's because I'm old.
You killed. People aren't going to have heard this yet, but you slayed the Eastern Conference. So
Stop
people go check that out. It'll be up maybe Friday or Saturday, depending on how much time I have.
All
People
right,
seem to love weekend pods. They don't download them, but they seem to love them.
whatever it takes. I have a weird one for you that's going to feed into something you and I are going to work on later. But Dan, here, you know what? First, I'm going to orient myself properly for the camera because.
Oh, thank you. I forgot. I should orient myself too. Let's go.
All right. Dan, you've got to pick one sub-22 player to build your team around. Chet, Şengün, Paolo Banchero, Scoot Henderson.
Ooh. I think I'm going Paolo Banchero. There's more positional versatility there than there is for everybody else. Chet is tempting, but Paolo is a ball handler and playmaker, where Chet's going to be more of like kind of the secondary passer. I think I appreciate Paolo Banchero's floor game. I trust the jumper enough. I'm going to go with Banchero.
These are going to get progressively harder. Same question. Sub-22 player to build your team around. Shaedon Sharpe, Jabari Smith Jr., Asar Thompson, Brandon Miller.
Oh, I'm going to go with Brandon Miller. I think what we've seen defensively from him, I wonder if Shaedon Sharpe's offense is super intriguing, and as is what Asar Thompson is doing or has done defensively for Detroit. But like, if you trust that Brandon Miller can be any kind of secondary playmaker, sort of on the level of a Paul George over time, just the body archetype and what he's already shown, being able to get to his spots on the ball and moving off the ball, coupled with the defense he's already shown. And he's been like one of the lone bright spots for Charlotte this year. I'd go with Brandon Miller.
I think Jabari Smith Jr. comes closest, but you're not building your team around any of these guys. I probably should phrase that a little differently.
No, I would consider, look, there's probably 3 or 4 teams right now. I'd say Toronto, Washington, build around Brandon Miller. There are teams I think consider build around Brandon. Charlotte.
All right, these will get harder now. So it's not a build your team around it anymore. It's just who would you rather have today? Derek Lively, Pajemski, Jalen Duren, Bilal Coulibaly.
Give me it's Bilal Coulibaly for me. I'm taking the mystery box because I think he brings elements of what everyone you just named. And when you're sort of looking at Derek Lively and Jalen Duren, Bilal Coulibaly has that explosive, has a big man's impact on defense if he actually hits at his peak. Second, though, I'm really tempted to say Lively over Duren, but then Pods is so good too. I'm picking Bilal Coulibaly, so I don't need a second place.
I think that's the right pick, and it's because like Duren and Lively, the best versions of them are still just like kind of contributors. They're not. I don't think Duren has the upside to be like you're 25-12 and you're running offense through him. I don't think so. I don't think Lively's that either. But like Coulibaly is just like, I don't know. Maybe he's going to be a number one option wing. Who can say?
This is yet another reminder. I know Duren isn't part of this. Just how difficult, and I said this before, the all rookie teams are going to be. Yeah. You just named 3 rookies that have first team cases. I think Bilal's probably getting a little bit weakest since he's not where he was at the beginning, but my God.
Okay. One more quartet of under 22s that you have to pick one of. Not to build your team around, just who would you rather have right now? Jonathan Kuminga, Cason Wallace, Jalen Green, Benedict Mathurin.
This is actually easier than I expected because it's only between the first 2 for me. Mm-hmm. Cason Wallace or Jonathan Kuminga. I'm going to go with Cason Wallace. I think he's probably a little bit too passive on offense right now, but if all he's going to do is hit, catch and shoot threes and defend his butt off and maybe attack a little bit in open space, that's a hell of a player. Kuminga's size is still tantalizing. He's gotten a little bit better with his ball skills, but
it's not a good sign that Jalen Green is not a consideration for that one.
He's tiny. And we now have evidence, like this will be the 3rd straight year where at least the first half of the season has been nightmarish.
Yeah.
When you look at his efficiency.
Yeah, I agree. You want to do a word association?
Hit me.
Two-handed.
Sorry.
Two-handed block.
Oh my God. I don't know why I don't have a 2. I don't have one.
I'll give you mine. Chet probably has some. I can picture the Michael Jordan one, the Wizards Michael Jordan one, like as a chase down, and he got it 2 hands off the board.
Yeah,
Ron Mercer, I'm pretty sure.
Dwayne Wade feels like I might be imagining that felt like he had some of those.
I bet you
That was a
LeBron's got to have a bunch of two-handed blocks, I would think, just of the chase down variety. All right.
that was a hard one.
Nick Batum.
Connectivity.
Yeah. It's like super slow corner threes that always go in. Jahlil Okafor.
Bust.
Is he the most forgotten, like recent big miss in the league?
Honestly, you know what the first thing that came to mind for me was speeding ticket when you said Jahlil Okafor.
Didn't he have also some weird, like, it was outside a bar and maybe it was in Boston or I guess maybe Philly, where it was like maybe a fight or something. It was like the third incident of him like being out and getting in trouble as a rookie. That just like,
And there's also something with Nerlens Noel in Philly where it's like, I think he got in trouble because he was either renting a house with people and they were like, they destroyed it. They're like taking shits in the upper deck of the toilet. And so I was like, what was going on in Philly during the Hinkie era?
I don't know. Not a lot of accountability. All right. Scorers table.
Patrick Beverly.
That's mine too.
Oh, was it?
You won, yeah. I guess like I'm trying to think who else has jumped on the scorers table. Didn't Wade do it once?
John Wall did it.
John
once,
Wall
I think,
did
too.
It.
And Wade definitely did it.
It's
And I'm
totally
sure LeBron has done it.
Yeah.
Or he's laid down on the scorers table for sure.
So, yeah. Who I forget if it was Ben. I must have been Ron Artest that laid down on the scorers table and then got the thing thrown at him that triggered the Malice in the Palace.
Yes.
All right. Last one. 3-point celebration. Could be your favorite 3-point celebration. First one you think of
is just Steph. All the different ones where it's the go to sleep. He has the 3 fingers one. And then just my favorite. I think my favorite one. It's so brazen. It's just when he shoots it, turns around before it goes in and just stares down the other team's bench or the fans. I love it.
It was Wes Matthews that did the like pulling the arrow and shooting the arrow too, right? Because Jamal Murray does that on a lot of shots, but I think Wes Matthews used to do it on made threes. Am I imagining right? That?
Also, is Melo the genesis of 3 to the dome?
But he did it with like which 3 fingers did he do it with? Because everybody's looking for it. Because sometimes it's the pointer finger and the middle finger and the thumb now. Sometimes it's the 3 little fingers. There's a lot of ways to go. But Melo did it to the head. That was one of the first ones I thought of, actually. It was his like, I forget which 3. I think it was like pointer finger, or it was like ring finger, middle finger, pinky to the head.
Yeah, he did it. So I'm looking at the picture now. It's the pinky, ring finger, and middle finger. So it's like the thumb and the index finger.
He would like hit his head too. It wasn't like a gentle celebration.
But yeah, Nick's era Melo was really going at it.
Yeah. I like a good 3-point celebration. It's a good one. Yeah, it's got to be Steph though. I have a couple. All right. What's the more interesting trade that did not happen? Zion for Scoot or Dame to the Heat?
Zion for Scoot, just because what is that? Like, what is this Pelicans team? Not that they would be better, but like they would probably still be, if Scoot was healthy, really competitive. And then just, I'm assuming that Dame is still in Portland with Zion there. And then what does that do to the trajectory of the Bucks? What does that do to the trajectory of the Celtics? Because they will have traded Marcus Smart without getting Drew Holiday. A lot more trickle down effects, I feel like.
They're all over the place, the ripples on that one. Okay, going back a little bit. Dan, what is the more interesting trade that did not happen? Chris Paul to the Lakers in 2011 or Steph Curry to the Bucks in 2012?
It's absolutely Steph Curry to the Bucks, because I think there still would have been a very finite window with the Lakers. And then in Milwaukee, it's one, does Steph turn into Steph? Do they potentially still end up with Giannis and those two are together? Because that's absolutely, because they didn't draft Giannis at this high spot. And if they didn't take him at, what was it, 15? Like, let's just say they were better at that point. He might have still been available when they were actually on the board. And then forget about just the repercussions of, because when you look at what happened with Chris Paul, okay, New Orleans traded Chris Paul regardless. It just wasn't to the Lakers. What happens to the freaking Warriors if they just decide, oh, Monta Ellis is the guy?
They have 4 fewer titles, and like that's for damn sure. So they
drafted it Giannis 15th in 2013, and so it's just like that was 2012. You said the Bogut deal was, right?
Yeah.
So there's a world in which they end up with Steph and Giannis.
I have another kind of similar thing for you. This is just calling it a bigger what if. Tatum over Fultz instead of the Sixers trading up and giving up stuff to get Fultz, or Wiseman over LaMelo, Halliburton, whoever else you want to say? What's the bigger what if?
I think it's Tatum over Fultz, in large part because Tatum was so good right away. And given how the Warriors have handled their youth stuff, what type of a learning curve would LaMelo have gotten at the time? And he did not play Warriors basketball. To be fair, neither did James Wiseman, but they viewed him as like this David Robinson blank slate. And then the other thing, too, is just now, if you had said it was between Tyrese Halliburton, it's just he was not that high on anyone's draft board then.
Well,
otherwise, the answer would be Hallie for me.
That's the one where it's like, man, something. Then you're really talking two timelines. If you just have Halliburton taking over for Steph at some point,
Can I have a quick masochism? I'm going to follow up some masochism here.
Oh yeah,
what's the bigger what if? SGA to the Knicks or Halliburton to the Knicks in the draft?
I mean, either one would be cool. Like, I don't know.
Which one would they have given? Like, it probably, I think, would have been Halliburton, would have been the guy that more immediately made an impact because we saw what happened when he went to Indy very soon, where it's like Shea they were like kind of two, and part of it was he was with the Clippers, then he was with the Thunder team that had Chris Paul and Dennis Schroeder, but it took him a little longer to get into his megastar roots.
I think it's Hallie because like, can you imagine if because the transformative effect he has is just different than SGA, even if maybe in a vacuum SGA is just the better player. Like imagine the buzz of the Knicks as like the run and gun, like suddenly like we're the most fun team in the league. I think like that would you can't put a price on that one.
My real pick is that they probably would have ended up trading both of them.
Anyway. Yes, the Kings traded them. I mean, it's anything's possible. All right. Speaking of, this is. I mean, I'm curious what you're going to say because it seems like there's an obvious answer. What is the bigger what if, Dan? Marvin Bagley over Luka Doncic in Sacramento, or Jabari Parker over Joel Embiid in Milwaukee?
Oh, I think it's Jabari Parker over Embiid in Milwaukee.
Because
I think you kind of like the idea of having him and Giannis together is incredible, but if you have them together, does it limit what one or both of them becomes?
Personally, I'd like to find out. I think
I would like to find out too, but I'm just wondering if like that's a possibility.
Yeah, I don't know. It is kind of like they do occupy the same space, those two, in a lot of ways. But like the Luka over Bagley is just like, well, yeah, obviously that should have happened. And the Kings are just better off if you have Luka and De'Aaron Fox, you figure it out, I think, or you trade one for a mint, and then But the idea, because I almost had to do a double take on like could they already had Giannis, the Bucks did, and you really could have just added Embiid and then had a couple years off before he really started playing, where Giannis is spreading his wings, and then you're really in business. That would be, I don't know what that team does, but that's a fascinating hypothetical.
Yeah, that one kind of bent my brain a little bit.
I think that might be all in fact, that is all I have for you in stat padding.
Okay, this is a weird one, and it's if you were watching the Magic game on Wednesday night, you're going to know the answer, but if you weren't.
I watched some of it.
Okay, so Giannis Antetokounmpo and Thanasis Antetokounmpo hold the record for the most points scored in the NBA by brothers on the same team between 2019 and current day. Which set of brothers is second all time in total points scored while playing on the same team? The Morris twins with the Phoenix Suns between 2012 and 2015, the Wagner brothers in Orlando between 2021 and current day, the Holiday brothers in Indiana between 2019 and 2021, or the Hansborough brothers also in Indiana between 2012 and 2013.
I gotta knock off the Hansborough brothers. Not a lot of points to be had there, I don't think. This is like collective points scored, like total points over that stretch. So I'm gonna go the Wagners number one, and I'm gonna go, highest on the list. The Morai after that, and then the Holidays after that, followed by the I can't even remember who the Hansborough.
The Hansborough brothers. So no, the answer. So second all time is the Morris twins. Scored 5,280 points together while on the Suns. However, the Wagners in Orlando are up above 4,800 at the moment, I believe. I'll throw that up on the screen if I cut it up. So they are inching in on second place, but the Antetokounmpos are firmly in first place with almost 8,900 points combined, most of which, shockingly, were scored by Giannis.
Yeah, Giannis is doing a little bit of the heavy lifting on that one. I'm surprised I guess the Morrises, it makes sense, but like I always was of the mind that when one of them was good, the other wasn't, and it fluctuated like who the good Morris was, like every year or two for over 10 years. It felt like. Anyway,
okay, I have a couple more. So, here's a good one. Which NBA player has more unassisted dunks for their career? So self-created dunks. De'Aaron Fox or Damian Lillard?
I'm gonna say counterintuitively, it's Lillard.
Correct. 120 to 109. Dwayne Wade or Russell Westbrook?
My heart says Russ. I have to say Russ.
It's not even close. It's Dwayne Wade, 542 to 358.
Wow, he's so underrated.
Dwight Howard or Shaquille O'Neal?
I'll say Shaq. I don't think Howard was posting up a lot.
Yeah, that's not even close. Shaq, 1209 to 950 for Dwight. Giannis Antetokounmpo or LeBron James?
Oh man, I'm gonna go LeBron just because of the sheer volume of his career.
That was a smart call. 896 to 767. Kobe Bryant or Kevin Durant?
I'm gonna say Kobe.
Correct again. 489 to 457. Not really that close. Kevin Garnett or Tim Duncan?
I'll say Garnett. I'm gonna say Garnett. I don't think Duncan did a whole lot of Duncan, ironically.
It was Duncan, 341 to 295.
Got him by plenty.
Anthony Davis or Rudy Gobert?
So many offensive rebounds for Rudy. I'm gonna say AD.
Correct. 465 to 394. Carmelo Anthony or Blake Griffin?
Melo.
By a hair, 265 to 263.
Ooh.
Vince Carter or Andre Iguodala?
It has to be Vince.
It's not. Andre Iguodala, 417 to 384.
Unbelievable.
Finally, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or Allen Iverson?
I'm going to say SGA.
Correct. 73 to 65 already.
Tight one.
Tight one, but I mean, Iverson played a trillion years. He's also smaller. I just thought that was interesting that Shai was already up there. Okay. So this one, here's an interesting one. Wilt Chamberlain owns the NBA record for consecutive games of scoring at least 30 points with 65. Who has the second longest streak of 30-point games? Kobe Bryant, Wilt Chamberlain himself, Joel Embiid, or James Harden?
My first thought before you gave me any options was Kobe, so I'm just going to stick with that.
The answer is James Harden, 32 straight games. Wilt Chamberlain is in third place to Wilt Chamberlain with 25. Kobe was fourth at 16, and Joel Embiid is fifth at 14.
I want to say Embiid's on a run right now of the most 30-10 games since like Kareem or Wilt or something like that.
That was the genesis of me but I figured 30 points would be like a little bit more digestible for the audience. Yeah. So you're welcome to the audience. So my final batch of ones here, which I didn't actually finish, it's partially finished, but I have 6. So I guess that works out. So which NBA player has more games with at least 30 points and 10 assists? Oscar Robertson or Russell Westbrook?
I'm going to say Oscar Robertson.
That is correct. It is not even close. 221 to 84.
Wow.
James Harden or LeBron James?
30 and 10. I'm going to say Harden.
That is correct. 101 to 97. It's very close. Luka Doncic or Trae Young?
I got to go Luka there.
Incorrect. Trae Young, 71 to 61.
Oh.
Damian Lillard or Chris Paul?
Paul's been around for so long. I think I'm going to go Dame.
The answer is Damian Lillard, 49 to 41. Nice guess. Magic Johnson or Michael Jordan?
I don't know if Magic scored. I'll say Jordan.
That is incorrect. Magic Johnson, 58-38.
Wow. Pass the ball, MJ.
Steph Curry or Allen Iverson?
Iverson.
That is correct. You're really good whenever I pit Steph against somebody, but 47-35, not even really that close. Next one up, Kyrie Irving or Jason Kidd?
I'm going to say Jason Kidd.
No, incorrect. Kyrie Irving, 16-15.
Ooh, tight one.
Kobe Bryant or John Wall?
I got to go Kobe.
It's John Wall, 19-16.
Wow.
Giannis or Ja Morant?
I'll say Giannis, just volume of career again.
15-14 by a hair. DeMar DeRozan or Tracy McGrady?
Oh, why do you have to bring Tracy into this? I have to say Tracy McGrady.
The answer is Tracy McGrady, 11-9. Gilbert Arenas or Kevin Durant?
Gilbert.
That is correct. 14-12. And finally, Derrick Rose or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar?
This is 30 points and 10 assists?
Yeah.
I'm going to say Derrick Rose.
All right. It's only 9-8, though. So,
but it is Derrick Rose, though, to be clear.
Yeah, that answer was correct.
Sneaky.
Nice job on that one. Do you want to take us out of here? That's all I got for you.
Thank you. Great one. I enjoyed that. Everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for following, rating, reviewing, subscribing. Do all those things if you have not in the past. Help the algorithm love us back, as Dan says, by leaving comments, upvoting, thumbs upping everything, doing all the stuff you know how to do by now, because we tell you twice every podcast. And we appreciate it when you do it. We appreciate when you contribute. You can help do that by joining our Discord. The links for that in the YouTube and podcast description. Get your guess of players in, get some trivia questions in. We always appreciate that. Follow us on all our socials. Check out our merch. Ditto as far as the link for that being in the YouTube and podcast description. I think that covers it. I hope you had a happy new year if you're listening to this afterwards, which I think is when this is going up. Or before. Dan's shaking his head. I don't know. Have a happy December 31st or whatever. Sorry, I don't know what is time. As always, we close with a shout out to the one and only Frank Ntilikina and an apology to Jared Allen.